Hey, what's happening? Good evening. Happy Friday to everybody. I forgot to pay my credit card bill today. I'm scrambling to do that real quickly. All right. Oh, darn it. Good evening. Nope. Good evening. Nope. Hopefully that works. There we go. Boom. All right, I gotta make a payment here. How you doing tonight, everybody? Happy Friday. I'm just making a quick payment on my credit card. I forgot to do it this afternoon because I was walking the dog. Where can I go make payments? Pay bills. You know, they give you late fees now of like $40 if you don't pay your credit card on time. It's crazy. All right, statement balance. There we go. Pay the bill. There we go. All right, hopefully that'll work. I'll have to call probably and get a break. Good evening. How's it going? Happy Friday night. Today, I don't know about you all, but I'm just sick up to here of some of the conversations I hear on these lives on TikTok. It just makes me sick to my stomach. You know, I keep hearing this complaint that people are feeling uncomfortable, that there's this rise in anti-Semitism around the world, or, you know, everyone's feeling so threatened. And I'm thinking to myself, I've done videos about this. What's worse? Okay, the discomfort of feeling a rise of someone who doesn't like your group of people, which sucks, let's face it, or having bombs dropped on your building and watching half your family go bye-bye and the other half get hurt really badly. There's no hospital to go to, no food, no water, no electricity. You're freezing in the cold. There's nowhere to go, and more is going to happen tomorrow. What's worse out of those two? I think it's pretty self-apparent. Yeah, I was on a live today early. It was political conversation around it. It's a pro-Democrat channel that's trying to vilify Trump for the most part. And we were talking about things about the political process like I always do. I was talking about the fact that, you know, same old stuff I talk about, the fact that voting, there's this power structure that prevents politicians from serving their constituents. You've heard me say it before. And the guy just summarily kicked me off at one point. We had like a little bit of an exchange, I guess. It wasn't in any way controversial or combative. It was just putting ideas out there, and then boom. I was like, what? I mean, all the guy had to do was say, hey, I need to have somebody else come up. You know, like I do. I'll try to politely move towards a conclusion. I think that's just a better way to be. It's the second time that same guy has kicked me off. The last time they kicked me off, there were like 4 panelists who were furious at me. And all I did was, the conversation was centered around, if you don't know, in our country, we have the primary elections for president, and then you have the general election. So the primary decides who the nominee is going to be for each party. And then once you're the nominee, then you can run against the other party's nominee, and whoever wins, that's the president. So there have been 2 states right now, Colorado and Maine, that have decided to exclude Donald Trump from the primary ballot because of what they believe or perceive was a violation of the 14th Amendment for quote unquote inciting, insurrection, which is what a lot of people interpret what happened on January 6th back in the day. So my point was, when I went on this panel 5 or 6 days ago, and some people watched it, and I said, listen, I'm not a Trump supporter at all. And so, but they said that I sounded like one because I was making a certain argument that a lot of people who support Trump make. But I simply said, I don't think it's a good precedent to set to kick people off of ballots because of potentially politically motivated reasons. Right? I mean, I don't know what went through the heads of these people, but it seems like there's this concerted effort in many ways to marginalize Trump and keep him from running and do whatever they can to keep the guy from getting back in, right? And so I think that's a really bad thing. Even if you hate somebody politically, I'm not a fan of Joe Biden, but I wouldn't want to see Joe Biden for the fact that it looks like he may have been involved in corruption, that he gets eliminated from it. I think that's unfair too, you know. So somebody says here it's called rigging the election. I don't know if you're referring to Trump and trying to overturn the election. Listen, let's face it. I don't know if you know much about this. Most people don't follow this stuff. I'm a political geek, right? There are a lot of reasonable questions as to what went on in the 2020 election. There just is. I mean, it's refuting truth or refuting evidence to say so. Now, through the judicial process, that the different lawsuits that were brought to bear were all turned down, mostly for what's called lack of standing, meaning that the person bringing the lawsuit didn't have a right to contest the state's electoral process, which is crazy. But that's what the rulings were. I don't know if there was necessarily collusion, but I know that on the merits of what actually went wrong during the elections, most likely was not able to be adjudicated properly. So, like I said, I don't care who wins. I don't think either of them make a difference in terms of the country, other than some social issues and maybe Supreme Court justice appointments, right? And those are important. But, you know, I talk about the main power structure, economics, foreign policy, the real big issues. And I think they're both the same. But anyway, so the point I'm trying to make is that if you look at what actually happened on January the 6th, like what actually took place, there was a bunch of people who were left a rally. They went down to a building that's a public building. It's the U.S. Congress, the Capitol building. And things got violent outside the building, and people entered the building, right? And there were some people that appeared to be trying to go and find legislators and trying to impact what the outcome by trying to slow what's called the certification. For those of you who don't know, when you win the presidential election, you're not actually president yet. The Congress has to certify, the electors have to go cast their ballot, and then the vice president certifies it in Congress. And so Mike Pence was the vice president, and a lot of people were chanting out loud, let's go get Mike Pence, let's H-A-N-G Mike Pence. So there were some people that did some things that were out of, like, completely wrong, right, and illegal. Let's face it, when you enter a public building without permission, that's against the law. And so, you know, that's called trespassing under regular circumstances. Now, when there's violence involved, there's enhancements to those things, and there's, you know, interfering with an election and stuff like that. But what an insurrection in my book is, just to let you know, okay, in order to have an insurrection, you have to have a chance of it being able to go through and do an insurrection, right? If 5 people walk into a building and say, we're taking over, and you're like, nope, that could be technically called an insurrection, right? They have the stated goal of doing something, but they have no capability of doing it, right? It's like, could the H group right now take over Israel and depose the leadership and take over the country? No way. Not a chance in hell, right? Well, same thing with this gaggle of people that were like Proud Boys and whomever else, Oath Keepers and a ragtag group, some of whom did bring things with them like handcuffs or pepper spray or whatever. But there's also a lot of questions, all conjecture, and I don't have any proof about this, but I always, listen, as much as you don't want to hear it, I always tell people, if you let me talk to you long enough, I'm going to say something that's going to piss you off. And it's not because I'm trying to be confrontational with you. It's because everything has to be done in an evidentiary fashion, right? And the narrative that went out, and this is what I think really went on that day, if you want my take, and this is simply an opinion. Okay, this is not evidentiary, but in stepping back and trying to fit together in the broader political sense, as well as what happened on that day, try to make sense of it, right? That's what we all try to do. It seemed as if, stepping back and watching it, that this was a specific effort to delegitimize and marginalize a person who they knew was going to be back in the political scene. And so therefore, if there could be a way to have a series of events happen a certain way, it would delegitimize somebody, and then from that point there could be things utilized to further delegitimize or slow down or impede that person from participating in the political system going forward. Right? Could be. Now, do I have absolute proof that's within their minds? No. But my question is always like, why and who benefits? Right? Those are two questions you have to ask a lot, because especially when you hear something said on TV over and over again, which I call narrative control, and we've talked about that before, right? What was said over and over and over and over and over, it was an insurrection. It was an insurrection. It tried to stop the election, right? If you look at the words that Donald Trump uttered, right, the actual words that he said, there's no proof that he had a written plan or a conspiratorial plan behind the scenes that he coordinated with other people. There's no proof of that. And there's no proof that the words he said directly instigated the things that happened subsequent to that? Did he say go down there and kind of give them hell or whatever he said? Yeah. And was that advisable? No. Especially when you have an angry crowd that feels like they've been marginalized. That's kind of stirring things up a bit. But it certainly doesn't rise to the level of go down there, go inside, and take over. Like, it wasn't done that way, right? Now, you could make the argument that by virtue of saying something tangential, that he really meant that. You could make that point, right? But again, I can't get into the heads of people from the government as to what they may or what involvement they did or didn't have, and what their objectives may have been or not have been. And I think similar, you can't get inside someone else's head and figure out exactly what they meant. Now, you can take great umbrage from the fact that a sitting president is unwilling to accept what the public has been told is the legitimate outcome of an election, and that's been the consensus through the court system and all these other checks. Now, again, you have to understand how big power politics work to understand this stuff, okay? We know that the media is used as a way to control the narrative in most Western democracies. It just is. I wish it wasn't, but it just is. So there are a lot of reasons why certain parts of the establishment would like to see certain other parts of the establishment not compete for power. That's not out of the ordinary, right? So look at what happened in 2016. Okay, how much of a shocker was it to the Democratic establishment, who had all but cashed in all their chips on Hillary Clinton? And then something crazy happened, right? This guy who was considered a goofball at first won the damn election, completely unexpectedly. Hillary Clinton got more popular votes than Donald Trump, about 3 million more nationwide. But because she got more in states that she won, they didn't help her because it's 50 separate state races, winner take all with the electoral votes. So it was a shocker. And Donald Trump, he should have seen the room of all the Clinton supporters when the results were announced, and they just looked like they were like devastated, right? So I think the establishment had all but basically run Hillary past the finish line thinking she'd won. It's almost like the person at the race who slows down at the end to wave to the crowd and somebody comes running right past him and wins. It's like that. And so, I think there was so much anger and vitriol and just desire for revenge just to get back at somebody. So I think in terms of dirty tricks, politics is a rough game, right? They say politics ain't beanbag. So what people are willing to do in politics to try to win and marginalize others is dastardly. It brings out the worst of us, right? It's all sorts of dirty pool and dirty tricks and stuff like that. So, it's not out of the question that something would have been cooked up to try to do some of that, right? It doesn't seem completely out of left field. So, plus there was, I don't know if you noticed, I'm not a fan of this person, but I'll just tell you, I saw a hearing. It was a representative of the FBI being asked questions by different members of Congress and the Senate. It was a Senate hearing, I think. And Ted Cruz, the Republican from Texas, I'm not a fan, but that day I thought he asked some very good questions relating to trying to find out more about this from the FBI. And they said, here's the question that he asked the person representing the FBI. Were there any agents or confidential human system, what do they call them, confidential human assets, that were in the crowd on January 6th? Sorry, Senator, I can't answer that. Was there any involvement of any other military or elements of the government involved as agents provocateur on January 6th? Sorry, I can't answer that. Stuff like that. So why would it be that a federal agency that had nothing to do with anything that day, if they didn't, they'd say, no, absolutely not, right? But they knew they were under oath. They'd be perjuring themselves. When you testify in front of the Senate, you're under oath at that point. And so if you lie, that's called perjury, and that's a federal felony, and that you can go to jail for 10 years for that. So it seems a little dubious, right? Why would an agency that was asked directly, did you have any involvement, say we can't answer? So that leaves a little bit of doubt, right? Fair enough, right? But that seems kind of dubious, kind of suspect. And, it's, again, who benefited by that all happening, right? The people that were involved in it got in big trouble. I think the government went out of their way. One, this is two things, I think. A, it had the effect, no matter how it came to be, the effect that it had was to give a good portion of the public the impression that this guy was so bad that he would even try to steal an election with force, right, through an insurrection. That's the language from one take. And the other take is, if you're on the side of supporting President Trump, which I'm not, but hey, there was a lot of stuff going on that was fishy, and therefore we have every right to try to stop the steal. which was the language that was used, right? So, but imagine you're watching a movie that's a make-believe after movie of this event, and they're trying to fictionalize it for entertainment purposes. Let's talk about the movie script for a second. And in this movie script, the people that are really wanting to have something bad happen to the sitting president, it could be Donald Duck for that matter, I don't care who it is. They wanted to do something to make the guy look bad, and they figured, you know what, we know this guy is pissed off about perceivably not winning. He's got his whole group, convinced of this fact, like they're angry and they feel dispossessed. Why don't we take advantage of that anger and vitriol and kind of lure them into a situation? This is a movie script. Okay, this has nothing to do with reality. This is a movie script, fiction. Fictional character says, why don't we get this fictional audience who's pissed to come down to this building and try to disrupt things? Wouldn't that make this person look horrible? And we could even try to tie the little pep talk he gives to them as a way to tie him to what happens. And so therefore, why don't we put some people in the crowd, some officers or undercover people wearing the Trump regalia, that kind of spur people on and kind of hype people up, and even maybe start some of the fire, right? Put the kindling in place, light the lighter, and then let the fire go where it goes, right? Now, it may not have gone anywhere, possibly, right? It could have just slowed down, but it went where it went, right? And then somebody was, pow-powed, the Ashley Babbitt. And, that guy Jacob with the giddy up, that QAnon giddy up. Hey there, how's it going? All this stuff happened, and we saw a lot of it on TV. What we didn't see on television in this fictional movie was all the other recordings that weren't necessarily in alignment with the original story that was so hammered in the media. So in this fictional movie, there's been a desire to release the other footage that might show a different angle on some of the narrative. So for example, there was footage that got released, know it or not, and a lot of it still hasn't been released. But in this fictional movie, it showed that the Capitol guards were literally opening doors and guiding people in and walking with them kind of peacefully. Now, if this was a real insurrection and people are running down the hallways trying to grab somebody and make them do something or worse, why would these guards not do something about it? Stop them, at least not let them go any further, right? Why would they walk quietly next to them, stuff like that? So, in this fictional movie, because I can't talk about the real situation or it's going to get me off, I'll be taken off here, just like you can't talk about the pandemic in straight up terms either. It's just, this is stuff you can't talk about. But in this fictional movie, that would lead other people watching from the outside to question some stuff, right? The audience would be like, And I think those are reasonable human reactions. So some people have convinced themselves beyond a shadow of a doubt of what they've heard on TV is just, there's no questions asked. It's got to be this. Don't even talk about it, right? You're a kook if you talk about it. But like anything else in life, if you're being really, really brutally honest, you have to be open to a variety of information and take it for what it's worth and best kind of sift through it, compare apples and oranges and see what you come up with, right? So I don't have a dog in the fight. I don't give a shit if Biden gets elected, Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump. I don't like any of these people. But in fairness, if I was a supporter of one candidate or the other in this particular movie, I wouldn't want to have my candidate be demarginalized initially if it did happen. And then subsequent to that, if we did something to show our anger for it, that it gets turned into this overblown event where things went too far, obviously. But of course, it had no chance of being effective in terms of the stated outcome of the insurrection word being used. But, look what it's done to tarnish the reputation of Donald Trump, plus all the other charges that have come up. And again, maybe every single charge that's been brought against Donald Trump is completely legitimate. A lot of people believe it is. They call him a criminal. They say he's got 93 indictment counts. He can't possibly be fit to serve. The question is, what if a lot of this is politically motivated? What if all of it's politically motivated, right? So I can't say for sure, but if it looks like a duck and it walks like a duck and it sounds like a duck, there's a good chance it's got duck-like qualities, right? Talking about Donald Trump and what has been going on since what happened back on January 6th a few years back. And, it looked like a riot that day when I watched it on TV live, obviously, like most of us did. And, I just kept shaking my head like, something just doesn't feel right about this, man. It just doesn't feel right. And I know if you're a Democrat and you don't like Trump, you don't want to hear stuff like this because you feel good about the fact that this person who you don't like strongly doesn't get a chance to, my whole family's like this. Okay, it's one of the big reasons why we're not in touch with each other. They think that I'm a nutcase, that I support Trump, which I don't. But the fact that I even question any of these things, they think I'm a total Alex Jones nut job, right? I question everything. Not just to be, not just for the sake of being confrontational or, just being I'm not completely cynical about everything, but I try to at least compare stuff and look deeper than just the first layer, right? That's just how I'm wired. So if any of these things do turn out to be things that are upheld, that are accused against a president. So just look at the optics of it from the other side, even if you hate Trump. You have a president that has questionable charges brought against him in these different municipalities. They're all state-based charges. Remember that in the case in New York, it wasn't a criminal charge for E. Jean Carroll, it was a civil case that was brought for damages, which he ended up having a financial penalty to pay. But there was no criminal offense, there was no violation of law on the criminal side, which would be prosecutable, and then there'd be, other terms of, penalties or sentencing. But that wasn't what happened. So you can call him a convicted R-word, but that's not true. He lost a civil case regarding a non-criminal case around that issue, SA basically. So again, I don't know if he did what he did back then with her either. It doesn't seem likely, given I know how the guy's wired and the kind of women he chases after, but who knows? So I think these are legitimate questions. Listen, when somebody says you can't bring that up, you can't talk about it, it's a done deal, I'm like, no. Who the hell are you to say the conversation can't even occur? That's like complete censorship, right? And if you're somebody who's not willing to have open conversations about stuff to challenge your own beliefs, that's your problem. But you can't tell other people what they can do or can't do with their conversations, right? And that's one of the things that got me on the outs with my family. I was told I couldn't talk about certain things. I'm like, okay, I'll go elsewhere. So it's unfortunate. But let's hope, for the sake of the democratic process, whatever pieces of it are still intact, that there aren't political reasons to keep people off of ballots and stuff like that. I think that's a bad precedent for everybody. Democrat, Republican, Independent, you name it. Okay? I don't know for sure what happened. I don't think anybody's ever going to know exactly what happened, but the more it's just like what happened on October the 7th, very similar thing. We get this very one-sided view of it. It's plastered everywhere. Oh my God, XYZ, oh my God, XYZ. And then a couple of weeks go by, you learn, oh, okay. Okay, all right, much different, military involvement. Some of the stuff was not as not as crazy as they said it was. A lot of stuff didn't actually happen. You start to learn and you start to put different pieces together, right? And that's all this is, same thing. So anyway, I just don't want to see anybody get marginalized. I've talked a lot about the political process being, I think irrevocably messed up. So, yeah, people talk about, someone just mentioned about, what about sensitive documents, right? So here's the thing about presidents that people probably don't understand. There's a lot of latitude that presidents get regarding documents if they leave their term. And they have the right to declassify documents and take them with them, as every president has done since the beginning of time. And why they're allowed to do that, I don't know. It would seem to me that if there's sensitive issues, why should any president be allowed to declassify something and take it with them? Doesn't make any sense. But Joe Biden did it. He did it when he was a senator, which you're not allowed to do. But they let that go and didn't prosecute that. So why would Joe Biden get to put a bunch of documents in a garage with a vehicle for 10 years, with a Corvette or whatever the hell it was? Does it matter if Donald Trump has some stuff stacked in a bathroom at Mar-a-Lago when the FBI raids him like he's some sort of, Pablo Escobar? It just seems very, very, overtly political. Best way I can put it. And like I said, I don't think these are good precedents to set, whether he was guilty or not of those things, whether there's a problem. You got to remember certain things. It's almost like this. Imagine if you're speeding, okay? Technically, you can be arrested for speeding. I don't know if you know this. You can be arrested and taken to jail for speeding. It's a misdemeanor, but you can be imprisoned for that. Now, normally what they do is, as a courtesy, they give you a citation. As long as you sign it and say you're going to deal with it, you get to go. But if you refuse to sign, or if you're belligerent with the officer, or if the officer perceives they can take you to jail anyway. Not against the law. It's just not practiced. Same thing with this. It's very rarely something that gets enforced. It just gets, go, leave, you're done, right? Just don't let the stuff out to the public, which he didn't. Now you can argue that he was not being as responsible by not having it under lock and key, but I think intent has a lot to do with this. There's misfeasance and then there's malfeasance. So misfeasance is, hey, you shouldn't have done that. That wasn't the smartest thing to do. But it doesn't seem like there was an intent for you to let this stuff out the back door, right? You weren't like planning to give it to somebody. Then there's malfeasance, which is you had a plan, you acted on the plan, or there was conspiracy to act on the plan, and therefore that can be something that can be arraigned for and then prosecuted, right? So again, you just have to keep things in their perspective, right? And you can't play it both ways. You can't say on the one hand, this person deserves no scrutiny, but this one deserves all the scrutiny because you don't like them, right? And because this person you like, the standard that you're applying as far as oversight is minimal in this person, but to the letter of the law in this other person, right? It's not fair. Hey, all the Bakers, how you doing? So again, there's a lot of talk right now. If you see a lot of these lives, I flip through them a couple times a day, and a lot of them are left, right, and a lot of them are really unpleasant and they're ugly. And there are people saying, you're an idiot, you're a moron, you're a Democrat, you love Joe Biden, he's killing the country, And other people go, you're in love with a criminal, he's got 93 counts, he's not fit for office, right on down the line, right? Now, who do you think is quite happy to have things be this way? If you're someone who's doing just fine right now economically and you're looking down at the kids and they're fighting, they're not going to bother you, right? You're good to go. They're going to keep spending their money at the chain stores like good little peons, working for the companies and taking the lower wages and lower benefits and dealing with inflation and, off you go. And so that is what's going on right now. And it's really sad that people are more focused on bickering at each other than taking a second, taking a breath, look up and look who's got their big boot on your neck, right? And if you bring these things up in these forums, they think you're crazy. Like, well, what else can we do then? You're like, they think that voting for their guy or their tribe is going to somehow fix things or going to be better than the alternative of the guy they hate. But most of us would agree that voting is like the lesser of two evils, right? Everybody always says that. It's the lesser of two evils. I have to vote for the one I hate the least, right? And all the politicians are crooked and that kind of stuff, right? Well, that's very inanimate. Everyone's bad. But it's not the everyone that's bad. It's the system into which they go that's bad. And so without changing the system itself, you're not going to change any of the dynamics by putting different pawns into that same chessboard, right? You're still going to play a game of chess. And guess who always wins? The better, bigger, stronger player, which is the wealthy class, the national security state, the special interest groups and all the big money in politics, right? So I did a video on this today. The bitter pill that people don't want to swallow and may not even know about is that it's going to take something other than the regular stuff to get a change. If a change is desired, sincerely, and if it's even possible once it is desired to get it done. I don't have the answers to that stuff. But I've been thinking of this for 20 years. You kind of watch the writing on the wall, and it gets pretty clear after you vote election after election. You go Republican, then Democrat, then Democrat, then Republican. And as Vladimir Putin said, and when somebody interviewed and said, would you rather have President Trump or would you rather have Joe Biden in 2020? And he said, it makes no difference. And he said, well, why is that? He says, because the policy will be the same. And that should tell you something, right? When a foreign leader doesn't care who gets elected, why should you? Right? He's a pretty smart guy. He's been in power for a long time and he knows what's going on. And he navigates the survival game as good as anybody. So the other thing I watched again today, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but Oliver Stone. This is just because we brought up the name of Vladimir Putin, so stay with me, it'll make sense. So Oliver Stone is a famous documentarian, and he did something called the Putin interviews. And he did about 20 hours over the course of 3 or 4 years of flying into Russia and meeting with Putin at various intervals. I think it was starting at the end of the Obama administration and then in through, the subsequent administrations of, presidents that followed. And so, and it was all like little chunks here and there, like an hour here, 2 hours there over the course, but it was 20 hours total. And so he went on Stephen Colbert. I watched them. They were on Showtime. They're fascinating, I think, and you can learn a lot about how the guy thinks. He's a very smart guy. And a lot different than what you've been told, by the way, which is a whole other story. We won't talk about that. But speaking of that, like what we've been told to think about this guy. So Oliver Stone goes on an interview with Stephen Colbert, that night show host that took over for Letterman. And so he's asking Oliver Stone, he's like, "Oh, Oliver, you seem to be pretty nice to this guy, you know." And he goes, "Well, I found him to be a very, straightforward, straight up Russian nationalist. He obviously wants to help his country out. He wants to make sure his people and his country do well. And those are his interests." And so, and then Colbert kept pushing him like, "Well, don't you think he like beats people up and poisons them?" And the audience starts laughing. And Oliver Stone says, I didn't get that impression that he does those things. And the audience laughs and laughs and laughs. And it just goes to show you how incredibly programmed the public is, because the entire audience of mainly younger people are just laughing at Oliver Stone, who's trying to relay the realistic impression he got from sitting across from a leader like this. And it's as if they're mocking him that he's too dumb to see what they know. And I saved the clip. I'm going to do a video about it. But it just really hit me. That shows you the absolute power of propaganda. Because our society, believe it or not, and in 2000, this is the crazy part, if you don't know Putin's history, he took over in the year 2000 after Boris Yeltsin. Boris Yeltsin was a disaster for Russia. I mean, great for foreign business. They came in and basically stole so many things from Russia in the years Yeltsin was in power. But Putin came in the first 2 years he was president. He didn't really make many huge changes because he didn't really understand exactly what was going on. He was trying to figure out the relationships because he's a very slow, methodical guy. He doesn't act on a whim. He's a very careful thinker. And the more you learn about the guy, the more you're going to be like, wow, this guy's he's an amazing human being, even though, you've been told to hate him. And this is the whole point. For the first 2 years he was in power in Russia, former KGB guy. Most people don't know this. Do you know what he did after he finished working for the KGB? He was a taxi driver in Moscow. The richest guy in the world, right? He's a fucking taxi driver. So he's a basic guy that just was appointed to a very high political ranking office by somebody who had been fond of him, getting to know him, which was Boris Yeltsin. Anyway, so he's not some criminal mastermind like they make him out to be. So basically, in that nature, people are programmed to think a certain way. In 2001 to 2002, you can pull archives out of the newspaper. There are people saying great things about the guy. Oh, he's a great leader. He's leading the country to economic development, all those kind of things. Now, as soon as he started to figure out the game that was going on and who was pilfering whom and how bad it was happening, and the impact after about the 8 or 9 year mark of these corporate raiders coming in and doing what they did, they were starting to really hurt the working class. Like, I mean, big time. Like when they were under Soviet structure, people had that wasn't a luxurious life, but it wasn't one where they were in despair because they had basic, security under the Soviet system. Well, the corporation guys came in and totally dismantled that, right? For profit, like corporate guys do. They start to lower the wages, get rid of the pensions, lower the health, all that stuff, like they do here. And of course, Putin was like, no. He put his foot down and was like, listen, you're either going to do right and give them something close to what the old system was, or you're going to get taken out. We're going to kick your ass out of here. And so they said, fuck you. And so he said, okay, fuck you. And so he started working very hard to put pressure and get these people out. And he did. So he was able to take the oligarchy basically and force them out of their control of these industries one by one through whatever means necessary, which is pretty interesting, right? I mean, imagine right now an American leader advocating for workers and forcing the owners of a company, the shareholders, to do right by the workers. It's just unthinkable, right? Unthinkable. So anyway, listen, do your own research. Go watch the interviews and there's hundreds and hundreds of hours of footage you can watch about Putin, speeches he's given, interviews he's given. I'm not saying he's a cupcake. I mean, don't get me wrong, he's a political survivalist and he's a very strong leader, but he's very popular in Russia, by the way. Even though there are some things that go on in Russia where the civil liberties aren't as great as they are here. Free speech isn't as prevalent, and if you protest in certain places, they can gather you up and take you away. It's not like here where you can kind of just do whatever the hell you want. But that exists in a lot of places, by the way. I mean, Quinn the Eskimo, just so you know, the Al-Sisi government in Egypt, and I'm not saying this makes it right. I'm just saying it's more typical than not to have this be the style of governance. If you go out and protest in Egypt right now, if you're pissed off about the fact that they're not letting enough people through the Rafah border, you're going to jail. And you're going to go stay there for 5 or 10 years. You're not coming out. That's what's happening. So it's not like the only place in the world that you can't do whatever the hell you want because the government needs to maintain control is Russia. Try doing that in China, right? So Again, different standards, right? It's all about keeping the same standard, right? Keeping it real. So anyway, getting back to the idea. So the people in the audience were laughing at this guy, which was laughable, but they were so convinced that they were right and he was wrong. They were just laughing at the guy. And it's funny, when people don't know, they're the ones that are the most confident and the most arrogant. It's amazing. Just like you hear on some of these, these lives when people from Israel or who support the Israeli position are just talking out of their ass and saying things that have no basis in reality or just silly arguments like 3,000 years ago, who cares? 4,000 years ago, it was Canaanites. Do a DNA test and follow the lineage of the people that were born, that lived there before the Jewish kingdom came to be. And they're the indigenous people, not to mention the fact that most of the people that live came from Europe, that made the greatest portion of the population. Because why? Because when they were trying to leave for America, the Americans pushed them away. They wouldn't accept Jewish immigrants at that time. And the European countries didn't want Jewish immigrants or Jewish population. They wanted to find another place for Jewish people. Let's face it. I mean, I don't know why there's so much anti-Semitism or resistance to Jewish people. I don't know how I don't feel that in my heart, but it's supposedly what was the thought of the day there. So again, to say that, everyone who's in Israel or everyone who's Jewish is from that lineage is absurd, right? There's all sorts of people that come from Europe. In fact, look at the leadership right now. None of the leaders that are in charge right now, Netanyahu, Smotrich, and Ben-Gvir, none of their families come from historic Palestine. They all come from Europe. Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, Ukraine, for example, all those countries. So it's a Zionist movement, let's face it. That's the thing that people can't understand. And yes, I'm sympathetic to the history of the Holocaust and what happened. But remember that the engineering of the Zionist movement happened long before World War II. It was engineered in the early 1900s, and it was conceived of in late 1800s. And then in the early 1900s, it was formulated into a plan, and they were figuring out locations. And then once they'd sort of settled on historic Palestine, then this massive lobbying effort went on with the British government. They eventually got the British government to concede with some money thrown in, and they got the Americans and the UN to back it, and then they went ahead and implemented it with a lot of crazy shenanigans leading up to it. That doesn't get any conversation in terms of, they think everything in the whole world's always been done to marginalize Jewish people. It's just not true. But it doesn't support one's argument to acknowledge the fact that it was a lot of, unfortunately, terrorism from groups like the Irgun and under the first Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion, that tried to do what they can to be disruptive and terrorize people to leave their territory where they wanted to take over, right? All that border stuff. Anyway, I agree. So I did another video about this. I said that a term's been redefined, and I said, if you're against the mass bombing and unaliving of, tens of thousands of people, and you're against somebody destroying your land and taking it from you, now you're anti-Semitic. And that's kind of where things are right now. If you're in any way critical of what Israel's doing, because they look at it all from their point of view, like, oh, we were attacked on January 7th. They attacked us. The H group attacked us. They went to war with us. No, they didn't. Israel's been maintaining an act of war, a blockade or a siege on a territory where you cut things off and control everything from them, from the air, sea, and land, is called a blockade. It's an act of war. So they've been maintaining that blockade as an act of war since 2007. And they say it's for security reasons they have to do it. Well, I can say because I don't want you to come rob my house, I can go tell all my neighbors you can't leave your house for the next 10 years. Bullshit, right? That's just not the way it works. So anyway, and of course we know what's been happening in the West Bank as far as the occupation, but it wasn't out of the blue. It was a surprise, but it wasn't unexpected given the dynamics of that. And you can't occupy and subjugate other people indefinitely, expect them to do nothing about it, right? Look what happened in the Warsaw Ghetto in World War II, right? People who were Jewish, who were under terrible conditions, living in these smaller and smaller spaces with no food, no medicine, no proper everything. And a bunch of people said, you know what? We've got to try to do something, right? And that's normal. So why is it okay for Jewish people who are being horribly persecuted under the H group, for them to fight back under their horrific mistreatment, but somehow it's completely unexpected when Palestinians do it when you're the one oppressing them? That's a double standard in my book, right? I hope you agree with that. All right, we got to get some guests up here. I know usually by this time we have guests that come up. So if you want to join me, at some point I want to get a panel up here so I can have some different points of view. Like, Eric does, Eric Warsaw. He usually has about 500 people on a Friday night. In fact, I've been promoting him so much, maybe some of the people that would come watch me are watching Eric, which I'm happy if they are. Good for him. Yeah, we have a guest coming up. We have Chris. So, Chris, please tell me I'm wrong and why, if you think that.
Oh, wrong about what part, Chip?
Whatever you want to say.
I can't say that you're wrong. We might have different viewpoints on different things, but wrong, I don't think you are. I think that our viewpoints, though different, are both relevant.
Okay.
And I think that the biggest part for me is this, that the American people don't realize that we might vote, but they're selected and not elected.
I agree with that.
That's my assessment of it from where I stand. And people can, tell me that I'm wrong or whatever. But, they pick our candidates for us. And they pick both sides of it. So no matter who wins, they control them. And that's my assessment of it. And my assessment is also the people of America, they're just ignorant to the world.
Do you think that Donald Trump is an exception to that, or do you think he's all part of the same thing?
No. Look, what I'll say is this. He ran under the Republican Party for a reason. He sure the hell didn't run as an independent. Period. If he were truly for the people, I believe in my belief system, he would not have run as a Republican. They never would have supported him unless he was willing to conform to their bullshit.
Interesting. Yeah, there's probably going to be some control no matter who you are, how much money you have in terms of some of the rules of the road. Do you think that people voted for him in 2016 because they were so sick and tired of the same old, and that Hillary may not have been the best representation, even given that?
Okay, they call her Hillary for a reason. And I think that swayed a lot of people away from her. I think that the United States of America has this viewpoint of the Clintons. No matter who you are, no matter what you say you believe, when the Clintons come to mind, the first thing that comes to mind is Hillary's body count, not Bill's in the Oval Office.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Yeah, I did a Chat GPT. For those who don't know, Chat GPT is this AI system that you can go on the internet. If you go to chatgpt.com or whatever, I typed in, why do so many people who know the Clintons keep mysteriously dying? And the thing said, there's no evidence that the Clintons have anything to do with any, standard.
Oh, if that's the first answer, then you know the answer for real, don't you? Like, if that's the first thing it came up with, there's no evidence. Instead of, accidents happen, the first thing is no evidence. So the first thing I would think is, okay, you're full of shit, ChatGPT. You're full of shit.
Yeah, a good example of that is Vince Foster. You don't know who Vince Foster is? He was on the Clinton inner circle, and he was a lawyer who he quote unquote committed suicide in a park, parked in his car. He had 2 pals in the back of his head. Now, I don't know how good you are, but I don't know if I'm going to live through the first one and do the second one, right?
Yeah, I'm a really good shot. And, maybe he had one of those CIA installed apparatuses in his car where he just hit a button and, it did 2 to the head. But that's the only thing that I could think. God help me. I did not unalive myself, if anybody's wondering. Later on down the road.
That's funny. Did you all ever see, there was an episode of The View, Norm Macdonald, the famous comedian before he passed away, he was a guest on The View, and they were talking about, what do you think about Hillary Clinton? He's like, well, I didn't know we could elect people that were guilty of murder. And they're like, what? He goes, yeah, she shot people, So I thought it was pretty funny when he put them on the spot. It was Barbara Walters was on The View before she died too, and she was the one who was trying to tamp it down, like, you can't say that.
Yeah, and you know what? The censorship that they have us saying on this app and stuff, someone keeps telling you to please check your Telegram messages.
Yeah, I saw that. If I check them, let me see if I can check it on my computer. Thanks for the heads up.
Oh, and you can check them when you're on live. It'll just pause your live for a second. It shouldn't kick me out of the box, I don't think, but I don't know. But you should be able to check them on here. The thing is that people don't realize these crazy things about this world, right? They want to censor us. They're changing our vocabulary and the words that we use in our vernacular. When we're on this app, they are completely social engineering us to change our words. It's the craziest thing.
Yeah, it's bad.
Yes, Telegram's an app, P. Parsons. It's an app. It's called Telegram Messenger. It has a blue paper airplane. They do groups on there, Telegram channels. Um, I know I'm sure Chip's full of groups or might have one. I run a geopolitical Telegram group and then a Patriot group about change and stuff like that. And I know some other good groups on there that are politically geared groups and some that are just weird. There's some weird groups on there though. Don't search things in Telegram if you aren't really looking for it because you might find some weird stuff on that app. And there's a lot of
Yeah.
good information on there though, and it's not censored like TikTok is. So you don't have to watch. Oh, see, there's Chip's link tree that someone put in the bio. I mean, in the chat.
Yeah,
Um,
thank you.
but it's one of those things that you don't have to watch what you say on Telegram. You can post all types of information and articles. You can do lives like this on Telegram, but random people can't join them, which is a good thing, I think. But we don't. No, you don't have to pay for the app. It's free. It's a wonderful place. I've met some really good people on there from some of the groups that I'm in. It's a beautiful place to be. So
Yeah, it's a nice deal. A lot of good things going on there. So yeah, I think I got the message what you're talking about. If whoever's talking, it's about that guy Moshe, I guess it is. What you're talking about
uh,
there.
yeah.
Anyway, so are you planning to vote in the 2024 election?
You know, if I vote, it will be for a third party. I do not agree with Trump or Biden. If I vote, it will definitely be third party. But there's just no candidates that really spark my interest right now. And I don't have any faith in our elections. I think that if no one voted, 81 million people would still vote for Biden. Do you feel me? Like, I think if the whole U.S. said we're not voting, there's still
Yeah.
81 million that would vote for Biden. And I know that sounds crazy, but I've lost faith. I've lost faith in our system.
Yeah, I feel the
Um,
same as you do.
and it's really depressing to me. And it's really sad. What do you think? Are you going to vote, Chip?
Not at the federal level. I usually vote in the local elections for like the county executive or county council members, and then maybe
Yeah.
for a state official if it's the right situation. But the federal stuff is a joke to me.
It's beyond a joke. It's sad, isn't it? I know you and I talked before. I think that's how we met. Was on my friend Mike's channel, and you said you're a veteran, aren't you? Is that if I
Yeah,
remember correctly?
yeah.
Okay. What branch were you in?
I was in the army. I was in a combat branch called armor.
Oh, okay. I've had 16 family members that have served in combat zones since 9/11, and
Wow.
my grandfather was in the Navy during World War II. My aunt and uncle were both in the Navy. I have another uncle that was in the Army before 9/11 and stuff, um, and then a great uncle who was in the Navy during World War II as well. And my grandfather saw some of the first bomb testings in the Eniwetok Atoll in the Marshall Islands.
Wow. Yeah, that was
Yeah,
a
he
big
was a
deal.
CB. Yeah. Do you think our military is used as the world police?
I wouldn't call it a world police. I would call it a world influencing tool and
Hmm.
tool of the establishment and tool of the permanent security apparatus as well as the corporate slash economic state.
Okay, so kind of like the bitch be cool stick that my stepdad used to call the paddle the bitch be cool stick, and that was so funny. Which he never used it. Our punishment was always physical running. You're gonna run. You're gonna do wall sits because he was
Yeah,
in the
well, sits there.
military.
Let's make a chair. Those things will make your quadriceps shake like crazy after time.
Oh my God, he used to wake me up at like 3:30 in the morning and make me run until my legs would fall off, and he'd be in his car, windows down, just cruising, and
Yeah, wow.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's what happens when you can't act right. But I wouldn't change it for the world because I still got the mouth on me. It didn't run it out. What do you think about the Organization of American States?
Uh, I think most of these organizations are basically front groups for American interests. So
Oh,
that's just a group
absolutely.
that's a group that's in Central and South America. So it's for sort of a block of Latin countries. It's usually
Hmm.
used to influence the government, the governing apparatuses of these countries for the purposes of, loans, IMF groups. It's
Yeah.
purportedly a group of countries that get together for their own benefit, but it's always co-opted by the imperial powers like the
Well,
United
yeah, they're
States.
headquartered in Washington, D.C., which
Yeah.
I find to be very interesting. And the fact that they do election integrity and election auditing It's very interesting to me that a lot of Americans don't know that. And what type of opposition do you want, Chip? I'm friends with a lot of people on all different sides of everything, and I'll send the live to them if you want some people in here to really discuss some things. If you tell me what kind of opposition, I'll send it to some of them.
I mean, you can send pro-Trump, pro-Biden, pro-Israel,
Okay, so just
pro-establishment.
pro establishment people. Oh, I got you. Don't worry, I got somebody you'll
Anybody
love.
who believes that, like, if I had David Pakman on here, that'd be a pleasant night for me.
So I have some friends who have. I'll send Ron. Ron's crazy. Ron didn't know there was a beach in Alabama. Um, Ron also thinks
Tell him
that
this
the
thing called the
established.
Gulf of Mexico. Gulf of Mexico.
Right, he had no idea. He told me that we barely had rivers in Alabama, as much less a beach. And I was like, "Are you fucking crazy?" And I was like, "Never mind, you're from California." I digress. And he didn't find that funny. I found it fucking hilarious. I think I'm the funniest thing since sliced bread, but he did not.
Okay.
Um, and
I didn't know sliced bread was funny, but okay.
it's hilarious. Because if you look at it, everybody cuts their crust off. What was the point of the crust if everybody's just going to cut it off? It's weird. Um, do you think that? Okay, so pro-establishment people. Oh, I have a communist friend who's very pro-establishment, obviously. Where is he?
I wouldn't call our establishment communist.
No, he's pro everything bigger government. It's really odd. Um, he thinks that we don't have enough national security rules as far as monitoring of the American people.
It says we don't have what rules?
Enough monitoring of the American people and what they're doing. He thinks that we need more. He thinks the FBI needs a wider array of ability to spy on people. Because he says
Well,
January 6th never would have happened if they could have. And I was like, January 6th was the FBI and the CIA. What are you talking about?
yeah, I think that's ridiculous to say it wouldn't have happened. The whole reason it happened to the extent that it did was because of
Hmm.
most likely intelligence involvement or something to that effect.
Exactly. I completely agree with that. What do you think about the new? Sorry, I'm trying to find him. The new Patriot Act, the one that they put in not too long ago.
Well, I think all of the Patriot Act provisions, both original and any subsequent updates, are overreaching, of course. And if you look at what happened 9/11, look at what happened subsequent to it. Again, it's all about the same type of thinking. You look at what changed,
Absolutely.
who benefited, what was the why behind it. Um,
Hmm.
look at the different world we're in now. You have militarism, that's sort of endless combat war, authorization for the use of military force, whatever, AUMF.
Hmm.
It's just used for all sorts of projections of U.S. imperial power and domestic surveillance and domestic crackdowns that were unthinkable
Hmm.
before then.
I absolutely agree with that. That's a very good assessment of that. Um, okay, that's a. Do you think that Trump, if he gets elected again, would further divide our nation?
Well, I think he's a divisive person insofar as the way he talks. He upsets a lot of people. Obviously, there wouldn't be so many people hating him if he wasn't. Um, I don't know if he can be more divisive than he already was. People are pretty firmly entrenched in their camps right now. Anybody who's in the middle is completely moronic, in my opinion, because they're just lost. But
Right,
I don't think he's going to be like people say the country's going to fall into a fascist dictatorship. It's the end of democracy. I think that's silly.
right. Fascist dictatorship. I could agree with that. Do you think that's a very interesting perspective the way that you put that? Um, what do you think the biggest threat is to our nation?
Well, we're already seeing it. It's the threat of the takeover of a corporate takeover, the national security state, the militarism, the overextension of late state empire, and crony capitalism, so that the people
Crony
at home are
capitalism,
being
yes.
ignored and marginalized, and the people in power are getting the money from the recycling of these allocations of money that are basically sucked from the treasury. We get the credit card bill, they get the benefit.
Right, absolutely. I agree with that completely. I completely agree with that. What is your assessment on some of the global entities like the Trilateral Commission or the Bilderberg Group?
You hear a lot about this stuff about the globalists. This is what Alex Jones talked about. They want to form like a one world government. I think they're already doing what they want. And remember that they're not going to put people into tyranny. They have to have people that work, and they have to have people to buy stuff in order to have the profits that you get. So the idea that they're going to enslave people and make you into this to remove people from the population, that's all silly. It doesn't make any sense for how they make their money. But I do think that what's being done right now is moving in the right direction without any sort of guidance from any particular group. I mean, look at where our lives are now versus where they were 4 years ago. I don't think anybody who's in the working class would say it's gotten better. And more people
Oh,
are
I've heard
spending
crazy
more.
things on this app.
Yeah, and
People say
are
that
really,
Biden's the best president we've ever had.
well, they're obviously not looking at the facts because most people's standard of living with things costing more has gone down. I think that in terms of where things are going in terms of civil liberties and freedoms are going down. And I think that's going to be I think it's going to be an inevitable slide in that direction. I don't think we're going to get better under either whoever gets elected president.
Oh, I would absolutely have to agree with that. I think that people are hopelessly optimistic and delusional. That's my opinion. I think that people are blinded by their own bias. Oh, Trump's going to do this for us. Oh, Biden's the greatest president we've ever had.
Yeah.
All while, those people are playing ostrich. They're burying their head in the sand. Only, able to swallow the facts that support their bias narrative or that their viewpoints. I think that it's a dangerous thing though for society to do that, in my opinion.
Yeah,
It
very
leads
much
to
so.
some very bad transgressions.
Yeah, unfortunately, most people in America, I think, they know they're angry about something, but they're not really quite sure where to direct that anger. It's a feeling of sort of helplessness and anger at politicians, thinking that they're the problem and they're all corrupt and that the system is rigged against them. I think they're right about the last part, but I don't think they really know exactly how and by whom and in what manner and where they
Mhm.
need to take their anger to make a difference and do something about it. That's the part I think most people are missing.
Well, and where do you think that they should direct their anger?
Well, remember that power only responds to one thing, and that's power. And so, right now, individuals or people that are in parties, they don't have the power to make changes through electing people. That's not where the power comes from right now. The power comes from the establishment that's controlling the elections. So, just like I always talk about this, forgive me for those who've heard it 1,000 times, but just like when you're working for a company, let's say there's 1,000 employees at a company that you work for, and let's say that the
Mhm.
management's been slowly but surely cutting people's pay over time, or giving less vacation or less paid time off, or less
Mhm.
money contributed for whatever it may be, wherever you feel like you're being marginalized or taken, and they're making record profits. So not only are they kind of putting it to you, but all the extra money you're helping the company make, you're not seeing any of it, or you're seeing less. So what do you do? Do you individually go to your boss and complain, or how do you address your grievances with your company? How do you overcome the power they have over you?
Oh, well, I'm definitely not going to my boss alone. It's not going to be my job. We're going as a group or nothing at all. Because as a group, that's where you have the power.
Yeah, exactly. So it's no different here. Same exact thing. And the reason why it's hard to form groups, even within a union, let's say you take one company with those same 1,000 people, we know people are politically divided. Not everybody in the workplace is that political, but sometimes if you get to talking to somebody, you find these, oh, like, damn, this person, I didn't know they thought that. So let's say out of the 1,000 people, you have 600 that are very politically, ideologically, and set where they are. And when you're organizing a union, you can't create litmus tests that are along ideological lines. You can't say, well, you like
Right.
Trump, so you can't come in the union, or you like Biden, or whatever. You say, do you want more vacation pay? Yes. Do you want to have better compensation? Yes. Do you want to have better pensions? Yes. Okay, forget about the rest of it. Let's just go with that for now and let's go to the union. Now, you're going to have to give some money out of your paycheck because that's the only way the union can A, stay alive, and B, if we do go on strike, it's going to give us a fund to back things up so you don't lose your house while we're going on strike if we have to, right?
Right, absolutely. I agree with that 1,000%. I was actually just preaching that almost in those same words today. Let's find something we can agree on and we'll move from there. Let's find
Yeah,
something we
and
can
so
agree is the problem. Let's find a solution that we can agree on and let's move from that point first. Then we'll go to the topics we don't agree on and we'll work,
right.
those later. But let's start at the beginning of what we can agree on. A first step of something to unite everybody.
Yeah, and obviously, it's if I were somebody in power right now, let's say I'm somebody that's high up in the administration, or I'm somebody wealthy making a lot of donations, and I'm doing really well, right? And I don't want anything to change because it's doing serving me pretty well. the last thing I'd want is all my workers to be unionizing like once. Like that, like look at Starbucks. They're freaking out that all the Starbucks workers are trying to unionize, or Walmart
Mm-hmm.
has publicly announced that if you try to unionize, they'll shut the whole store down, right? So that kind of deters people from
Right.
doing it. But if every single Walmart employee at every single store decided to do it, they wouldn't shut down all their stores because their shareholders wouldn't let them, right?
Right. Absolutely. And if the people don't realize, the government keeps us fighting. They keep pushing this racial narrative or this Israel Palestine thing and have us all involved in these hot button issues that a lot of people can't find common ground on. And what those hot button issues do is they incite more division and they push us further apart. And we have the choice to build the bridge or widen the river. And we're widening the river right now. We're allowing them to widen the river.
Yeah, somebody said divide and conquer. It's a good point. So remember that people don't really understand how much power we really do have. Ultimately, the power is in the population. The problem is how do you put it together? It's like one or two twigs. Yeah, they can be snapped pretty easily. But if you have a bundle of 30 twigs, there's no way you can break that. It's unbreakable. So if people come together, there's basically three resources that the people have that the power structure doesn't. We have our sheer numbers, way more working
Mm-hmm.
class people than there are management or wealthy class. There's our
Absolutely.
labor, which we talked about in a strike. And then, of course, there's our purchasing power. And so let me give you a scenario, a mock scenario. Let's say that 20 million people put aside their Trump and Biden differences and everything else and said, you know what? We're not going to go to work for the next week, 2 weeks, whatever it takes. We're going to help each other with putting together a community fund so that in each little community of, let's say, 20 or 30 houses, they have their own little pool they put together to help people out. You can come stay at my house, or I'll help you feed your whatever, whatever that's called, mutual
Mm-hmm.
aid. And every single
Absolutely.
person stop buying everything. Can you back the background noise a little loud there, Chris?
Oh, I'm sorry. My dog just did something. I don't know what.
So if you all stop buying anything but absolute essentials, so you literally just bought food, or maybe paid your rent, but you didn't do anything else. Like you literally didn't pay your car payment, just said F it. Didn't pay your credit cards, just didn't do, just only survival stuff. And what do we need to survive? We need water, we need food, and we need oxygen, right? So if it doesn't give you one of those three, you're not going to spend money on it. That's what we have to do. It's kind of suck the blood out of the system. So you suck the air out of the balloon that way, and then you don't work for somebody for a while, and that sucks the air out that way. And you do it in enough at scale so it makes a big enough of a difference that they have to then deal with it. Just like with a company. If one person says I'm going to go on strike, they're like, who cares? If 50 people say I'm going to go on strike, like who cares? But if all 1,000 workers say we're going on strike, it's like, oh, that's a big deal, right?
Yeah, and that's what the elite people, the people that roll the shit, they think in two ways. The only thing they understand is a financial loss or a loss of workers. That's the only way that they're going to get on our level. Is hit them in the pocketbooks, hit them where it hurts, make them pay attention to us. Because I
Yeah.
promise you, if even 10% of the American population went on strike and, quit going to work, we're hitting their pocketbooks. They would be begging the people to come to the table. What do y'all want to return to work? What do we have to do?
Well, the good news is that all this stuff can be laid out ahead of time. So if you have a massively decentralized movement where no one's in charge, and you have a series of steps you're willing to take that go up a notch or two every time until you get what you
Yeah.
need, but the outcomes are already determined ahead of time. So there is no conversation. You've let them know, hey, we got to get money out of politics. We have to overturn Citizens United. We have to get rid of corporate personhood. No more special interest groups lobbying the Congress. No more money in politics as far as donations for candidates. Just no money. Just you get free TV advertising time, and you can budget some small amount for buttons, but it's got to be limited. It's got to be capped. So there's not this big arms race, so to speak, with money to get elected. Because right now, 98% of the time, whoever spends the most gets into office, which is just not the way we want to do it. And then maybe we have something about healthcare, and maybe something about bringing back the money that's being spent on foreign military back to help people at home. Something like that would probably be the combination of things that would be like
Yeah.
top five. And I think most people would agree on those five, most people being, the 99%. And
Hmm.
that's what needs to happen. And then you just don't give up until those things happen. You just say, we're not stopping.
Right. And I don't think people realize, Congress has been allowed because the president doesn't have a lot of power. The president is the CEO of the corporation. He goes to the meetings. He takes the fall if the corporation fails. He, does all these things, goes to dinners and stuff like that. The Congress is where our power lies. That's the power. of the U.S. is Congress. And people don't realize that these congressional members forgot they answer to the people. They
No,
forgot that,
they didn't forget anything. What they're doing is they're sorry to
well, we
interrupt you.
forgot.
No,
Yeah.
it's not even that. It's that they've been sucked into a bad game that has the incentives and the punishments geared such that if they don't do the things that ignore the people, they get punished for it.
Yeah, I could see that too.
That's exactly what's
Yeah,
happening.
because
Most people who go in
we
probably
killed
don't want to
Rosa.
disregard their constituents. I mean, why would if I went in, I'd like to be able to help people. But if the rules are you have to raise money, and if the rules are uh, you have to abide by the team, the game, whatever the game is that the party structure tells you have to follow by, then if you don't do those things, what do you think is going to happen to you?
That's very true because, well, I mean, they showed us what happens to them. I mean, they've shown before what happens to them, and
Yeah.
it's I mean, like I think the last really good president we had that cared about us was John F. Kennedy.
Well, yeah, the one at least had some courage to step back and do that. Well, we've covered a lot of terrain, and I really appreciate your input. There's
I
been a
appreciate
couple
you.
people that have come up, so if you don't mind,
Okay,
is it okay if I let some other people have some time?
of course, of course. Yeah, I'll see you
Okay.
later, Chip. You have a good night.
Yeah, thank you so much. By the way, if you can get those people to come over, please do. I'd love to have those books.
Yeah,
That'd be great. Thank you so much. Yeah, that was a fun conversation. A lot of interesting stuff. But there, okay, we have Hala and then Alejandro. Alejandro, I just want to let you know, I'm happy to have you on, but it's got to be clarity of mind and thought. If there's anything in the middle of that, without saying the exact words, you know what I'm talking about.
Hi, Chip. I'm a big fan of yours.
Thank you.
Okay, so I was wondering, I recently watched the movie Argo. I'm not sure if you know about that movie.
Yeah.
Okay, do you think that the United States has sent in CIA to Gaza?
I don't know for sure, but I know that the goal of the United States is to have assets in as many places where they can possibly be located so that they can have an inside presence and intelligence as often as possible.
Okay, and what are your thoughts on the 33 Mossad agents that were found in Turkey? Do you think that they were there for a long time before October 7th? Do you think they came in after October 7th?
No, they've probably been there for quite a while. The way that the CIA works, if you don't know, I mean, the movies show you
Mhm.
some of it, but they have field offices throughout the world, and their whole goal is to turn people in that are already inside the society and get them to work for them for either financial gain or from some kind of blackmail or both. And then they can provide information as need be for those reasons. And so, like she said earlier today, if most people, I don't know if you saw this, I saw a TikTok video as well as a news piece that uh, I didn't know the exact number. It was like I thought it was like 30 people that were being slowly marched out of by law enforcement that were determined to be, or at least accused of,
Yeah.
spying for Mossad, which is the Israeli intelligence agency.
Yeah, and I found it weird that there were women with like head wraps, like as if they were Muslims, like maybe they were from Turkey or something. Do you think that they're most likely Israeli nationals?
I don't know. I know that there have been stories before of Israeli nationals posing as Arabic speakers and going into Arabic countries as if they were, of Arab descent. But I just don't know.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you for answering my questions. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for coming in.
Hmm.
Really awesome. Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. Our government, if you, the amount of money that is spent on just the entanglements that are used to create this web around the globe, it's a lot. I mean, and it doesn't get any above board conversation. In fact, a lot of the non-governmental organizations like the National Endowment for Democracy and USAID, Samantha Power, they're all geared towards being fronts for a lot of the things that go on in these intelligence agencies, and they act as the legitimate non-governmental organization in these different places that seem like they're promoting democracy or whatever their mission states. But there's always other things going on. Just like with foreign aid, same thing. You get the foreign aid, but that kind of thing. We're seeing it right now with refugees. There's conversation right now about what's going to happen with people from Gaza if they're forced out or relocated. And a lot of the foreign aid conversation has been, well, you can keep your foreign aid if you take this many people, 300,000, 400,000, whatever the case may be, which is pretty gross. Okay, we have Alejandro coming on. Hello, Alejandro. Hope you're doing well.
Yeah, Chip, you got me?
Hello? I got you.
Okay. You know the boycott movement is not working out.
Say again?
It's not working out.
When
Let
you
me
say
tell you
it's not
something.
working out,
Because
what do
we
you mean
got
by it's?
nieces, nephews, everybody working at McDonald's and Starbucks, and the only persons and people we're hurting is them. Because they're not gonna get a job. Now, you know that the high corporate companies, they got $30 million backed up in case they go into bankrupt. You know that?
I think you're saying just like you're saying that the boycotts that people are talking about enacting are only hurting the working class instead of the corporations. Is that what you're saying?
That's the only thing we're doing. So I don't think it's working out.
Okay, I mean
Because
that's a point. That's a point of view. Yeah, I listen. There's a
yeah,
good argument
it's
to be
not
made there.
working
Yeah.
out because you're only hurting your niece, little Kelly, and little Schmelly, and it's not the corporations. Those corporations are backed up by millions of dollars. You know, we know that.
Well, just to let you know, Alejandro. So it's not always just the financial situation, although that's a part of it. But just like what happened on October 7th. So the H group went in, and obviously, militarily, they weren't able to quote unquote beat the Israelis, right? That wasn't the purpose of the operation. The operation was to bring back hostages, but also to raise political awareness. And it succeeded in both of those objectives in that they were able to bring hostages back and hopefully get leverage to exchange prisoners. But how many of us right now on October 6th were following the Gaza/West Bank relationship with Israel? Not many, right?
Not many.
None of
Nah.
how many people are. So the CEO of McDonald's, I don't know if you heard this or not, but he publicly said that the boycotts are significantly hurting sales in many countries, and that because of that, they're suing the BDS movement, organizations that are participating in BDS
The
in general.
Public Affairs Committee, right? PBS or Public Business. Yeah.
I'm not sure which entities they are. I have to look at that,
No,
but
you
that's
mentioned PBS, right? Public Business.
no boycott BDS, boycott, divest, sanction.
Uh, okay, I got that one. Yeah, I gotta write that down. So the other uh, good thought we got tonight is that we are failing. I don't know. I think we're failing.
Who's we?
We, the people, because you and Eric Warsaw mentioned we're against the government, right?
What you say when we again? Clarify who the we are.
We, the people, against the government, like not
You mean
voting.
the majority? You mean the majority of society that's working class
The
against the?
majority of society, I think we're gonna fail again.
What do you mean by failing, or we're going to fail again? What do you mean by that?
We're gonna fail again because APEC, they're just ganging up on everything. They got control of the situation, and I don't know.
Well, I think to feel discouraged is probably natural, given that the power structures that I always refer to have
Yeah.
taken control of most of our systems, and it's not happened overnight. It's been happening since probably the late 70s, early 80s in mass. And there's been a corporate takeover. There's been a national security state takeover. There's been all of these court decisions that have institutionalized the various tools with which these things have happened, which is corporate personhood, money is speech. It's going to be very, very difficult if it's even possible. It's not your fault. It's not my fault. It's not the fault of anybody. Even our parents, who under whose watch it happened, because they weren't paying attention. They didn't fully understand this. They're living their lives, working. So we quote unquote we are up against tremendous odds, and it's not our fault that we're in
Exactly.
that spot.
That's
It's not.
that's
No one,
that's
but no
what I
one's no
was
one,
trying
but
to
no one's
explain to
failing.
you. Do
But no
you
one's.
think that?
Hold on.
Do you think?
One last thing. I want to say one last thing, Alejandro. But that's not to say that anybody's failing. Okay. The thing that we can try to overcome that power structure, and that may not work. But I wouldn't look at that as a failure. So I think that language is a little bit misdirected. So in fairness, what you could say is we're burdened by a very difficult set of circumstances that we haven't really addressed yet in totality. That's a fair way to put it. And then who knows? This is why we're talking about trying to get this organizing going to whatever extent it can. Let me bring it back on. Sorry about that. I think I'll let you go there. Try it now. It says, are you
No,
there? Okay, good.
Look at the standings right now. Look at the standings. What if we fail?
I'm not sure what you're saying. The standings. What does that mean?
Standings is political wise, and majority of the population vote. That's what we're kind of, we might fail.
Probably will, yeah. As far as, in other words, the first thing anybody has to do before they tackle a problem is acknowledge being aware of the problem, right? I would argue that many
Exactly.
Americans aren't even aware of what the problem is. They're angry and they're feeling helpless, but they don't know exactly what the problem is or to whom direct that anger, and then more accurately, what to do to overcome the thing they need to direct their anger towards.
And one question, Chip Barnes. Who are you asking the people to vote for? Who?
I'm not.
That's what I wanted to hear. Why are we gonna vote when they're gonna behind closed doors do whatever the fuck they want anyway? Excuse
Good
my
argument.
language. You
It's
know
a fair
me.
argument. That's a fair argument. I agree.
FUCK doesn't mean shit. Anyways, so even if you vote, they're gonna do whatever they want behind closed doors. Once you close the doors, you're in close quarters, and see, the Democrats and the representatives, they think that their vote is counting. No, you're not counting, because they got an agenda. The agenda that we and you and Chip Barnes and everybody were trying to close it down. The agenda is not our agenda. You know what? You can understand that now, that one?
Well, I want to repeat something that somebody named Amy brought up. She happens to have the same last name as me, so I'm very apt to answer. Amy said that there are other issues that are affected by elections, and so let me just cover that ground, and we'll come back to what you're
Okay.
talking about, Alejandro. So, for example, we saw what happened with the appointment of different Supreme Court justices, and then the subsequent impact that had on Roe versus Wade, which is the abortion issue at the federal level being legal, which it's no longer. So it's now adjudicated on a state by state basis, which can be very harmful to certain women who can't get health care in their direct area. They have to go elsewhere, which can be impractical or impossible for them. So I agree with that. And there are other issues that can get adjudicated, different social issues, different types of laws about, different things that matter to people. I'm talking about the issues as far as foreign policy, economics, the status quo of most of the large structures of the system as it moves ahead are inaccessible by the traditional political avenue.
Yeah. So how's that going now these days about abortion rights and everything? How's that going?
Well, I mean, if there's been a more conservative appointment of the court, which has leaned towards to more restrictive laws and regulations regarding abortion, access to abortion, and again, it's state by state. So, in that regard, the state elections are even more important because now it's at the state level that the state house and the state senate get to decide along with the governor.
Where do you stand on this issue on the abortion rights and Roe versus Wade? You know that. Where do you stand?
There's really no need for me to chime in on that particular issue because my job is to analyze political issues, not disclose my personal political positions on issues. But, I'm overall a benefit for freedom of people to have liberty and not to be told by others what they can and can't do.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, it's hard because if you like vote on the other side, or vice versa, we're still gonna get in trouble. So I'm like, oh shit, we're in trouble right here, Chip Barnes. We're in trouble.
Well, the way I like to say it is that you have choice A and choice B usually because 99.9% of the time, a third party candidate's never successfully made it to the top of American politics, at least not at the presidential level. It's very rare. It does happen at the gubernatorial level sometimes, but I call it heads they win, tails we lose.
Well, this is my point of view on Roe versus Wade. I don't know how you stand on that political movement or thought, because it's been going on since 1972, I guess. But I am for excuse the public, if I might offend. Um, I think that you got to have a right to choose whether you want to have an abortion. Okay, excuse me, no?
I mean, it's a very sensitive issue, right? Because there is a form of life that's involved with it, whether you want to say it's viable life or not. So a lot of
Yeah,
people look at it, a lot of people look at it in terms of
and
progression.
I know I'm gonna get in trouble with the audience because they're gonna think otherwise. But the world economics and everything goes with this question right now about um, being self-proclaimed righteous of your own life. Now, that's a question that you gotta take in consideration because we, if you want to say,
Alejandro, just to let you know, we need to kind of, if you can finish your point, we're going to let someone else take a turn when you finish your next point.
yeah, no, my next point is the next, I don't know how the Supreme Court is taking this about, this is big right now. Okay, other than the war that genocide is taking place, but Roe versus Wade is another big political point of view that a lot of people doesn't want to go into.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second. Alejandro, I want to let that be the last conversation point. I appreciate you calling in because we have a bunch of people that are waiting. So, yeah, it's a tough issue, right? I mean, there are conservatives that are religious that are completely against the idea of a woman's right to do anything, sometimes even in the event of grape or the health of the mother, which is really tough to think of. If I were a woman, which I'm obviously not, at least not yet, and if I was told by some older person, some older man, what I could or couldn't do because of what they believed, I'd be pretty upset. I'm like, well, who are you to tell me based on what you believe? Like, I'm happy to have you believe what you want for your daughter, your wife, but why are you telling me, right? Why are you going to try to change the law for me? I can see that point of view. And I can understand why somebody who thinks life is sacred and they don't want someone else forsaking that sacred life. I see both sides of it. Like I said, I tend to be on the side of freedom. And I know it's an unfortunate decision. I think no woman wants to make that decision. It's got to be a horrible situation. I mean, think you have an identification with something growing within you, right? It must be a very tough thing to have to do. So I don't know. I just think trying to, especially if a woman's younger and she's not ready to have a family, maybe the person with whom she conceived the child's nowhere around, and she's like, let's say she's 16 or something like that. Her doesn't even want her parents to know. I mean, imagine if that was you. What would you want to do? Just it's hard to, you got to think from the other person's perspective a lot of times and try to figure it out, you know? Okay, we got plenty of people waiting. I think it was Amy and then Tony and then Shireen. Sorry if you're waiting, guys. I'm trying to go as fast as I can to get people in.
Hey Chip, how you doing?
Hey.
I've been on your live before, so thanks for accepting me again.
Mhm.
With Alejandro's position on Roe v. Wade, I think if you look back at the precedents of the law, that was mainly based on equal human rights. It was rights to privacy, it was right to control, and all that good stuff. I don't necessarily think that the way that people think about it or approach it right now is politicized. That's the problem. But if we were to dial back to how this Roe v. Wade was established in the first place, it was based on rights. And if you wanted to segue that into the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, again, we're looking at human rights, right? So I think the core connective tissue right now is people have the right to live the way they want to live. And if you want to throw a bunch of, crap or melee or whatever into the scenario, at the end of the day, it boils down to I have the right to live my life with dignity and independence and a right to just move freely. So, when you're looking at everything that's going on over there and here, and what the connective tissue is between the influence and the non influence, and how people are frustrated with the process and the system and the politics that go into it, you don't have a clear answer. So, when you do go to vote, it's the best you can do is influence your community and your state and your county, and then just really work up from there. I know that's a far shot, but that's all we got for right now. Um, that probably comes off a little kind of like not optimistic, but optimistically, like I just don't want people to get into the position where they're saying that nothing I can do is going to matter. And I get it, like to an extent, statistically speaking, that's probably going to pan out in some places, but like just get out there and raise awareness and speak your mind and vote the way your conscience wants to vote. Don't give up on women's rights. Don't give up on healthcare. Don't give up on reproductive rights. Don't give up on whatever it is that you believe in. But it's tough and it's demoralizing, and it's kind of like it's almost an attack on democracy. But if we do want democracy to prevail, we've got to be inclusive, we got to be active, we got to be demonstrative, and we got to be looking at all the issues and just do our very best. And I appreciate your reflection on those notes. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, I can't hear you at all.
Sorry, I had my mute. I was going to say I brought Tony up, and I was going to see if do you mind staying so that we can have a conversation, or do you need to drop off?
Oh no, I can stay. I
Okay.
got my I'm good to go.
The only thing I ask when we have more than one guest is that each person take a turn, and if you want to jump in, I won't let anybody go for too long without giving somebody else the chance to say something. So, if you don't mind, I usually keep my mic muted while someone else is talking, just to take away even the chance of that. So let's bring Tony on here, see what Tony has to say.
Hey Chip,
Tony,
how are you?
Yeah, how you doing? Good.
Hi Amy, hi everybody. So my question is regarding the case brought forth by South Africa on behalf of the Palestinian people regarding the. I don't know if I'm allowed to say the word or not. It starts with a big G.
Yeah, the G side.
The G side, okay, and looks like that's going forward. It's got Francis Boyle handling, Professor Francis Boyle, who's had success
Yeah.
representing Bosnia and I forget the other country. I think he's got a couple notches in his belt. And my question is, what are your thoughts on that? Like, what's the time frame on that, and regarding the United States and their role in this, and how do you see
Yeah.
this playing out?
Well, unfortunately, the way I see it playing out, like anything else at the international level, is, let's just assume it goes through the process. Let's say it's adjudicated at the court, and let's say there's a decision made that there are indeed people that are guilty of violating the code that's been set forth. The question is, okay, the laws are only as good as their enforceability. And so the question is, if you do get a sort of a judgment against those who are found guilty of committing a crime, unless they travel into a jurisdiction within which they can be held and actually, punished for it. Just like what happened with, people like Dick Cheney and George Bush. They couldn't travel to certain places after the Iraq War because they had similar charges levied against them. But as long as they don't travel there, nothing will happen.
Right, I get what you're saying, but I mean, for for Israel to officially be charged with genocide
Yeah, it's-
on an international level with the highest international court, so to speak, and
yeah.
it doesn't look too good for the U.S. Do you
Oh
see
yeah.
that
As
as
far as
stopping
the
them
optics go,
or
yeah,
anything
the
like that?
optics are terrible for this. Yeah, I agree with you.
No,
Yeah,
I agree.
but
The optics are
see, the
terrible.
problem with the so you, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Chip, but when you go into the international court, you know, like you said, like there's no repercussions if that particular entity, sovereign, hasn't ratified whatever those international laws are.
Yeah,
So
agree.
if you were to bring that to the ICG, or if I get that acronym correctly, I
ICJ.
apologize.
It's
ICJ.
Yeah, then like basically South Africa bringing that in consortium to the UN to petition means that there's precedence. So the lawyer that you mentioned is one guy that was successful in presenting the precedents and then getting convictions. Now, if they bring, I don't know of one single case in international court where an entire country was brought to that level. It's usually an individual. Correct me if I'm wrong. So if they can build enough case evidence and precedents and then parallel that to the actions, then that's one thing. But those actions are happening concurrently. And because they are actively happening, there needs to be an investigation on top of that. So it might be postpartum, but again, they're setting the groundwork for it. And they're doing it in a consortium and not just, you know, vis-a-vis or one-to-one. And it will be interesting to see how that, you know, elevates or even proceeds to the level it needs to proceed to, because the, you know, the US is on the Security Council and they have permanent veto power.
Right.
So it would be interesting to see how they override that, if at all.
But are they able to in the same manner that they vetoed all the UN resolutions brought forth? I mean,
Well,
is
here's the thing: the UN resolutions come forth, but what happens?
they get vetoed by the U.S., but does
Well,
the
yeah, they
US
get vetoed by the US and they got a veto from the US and then an abstention from the UK. But the UK, I think,
That's
like,
that's a different body though. The UN is
it is a
different than the
different body.
ICJ.
And
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. Do they have does any country have any veto power with regard to the International Court of Justice?
It's
No.
not a veto power, it's enforceability based on so it says right here, I'll read you something from Roy. It says the ICJ's rulings are final and without appeal, but it has no way of enforcing them.
There's no enforceability because those sovereign countries have to ratify the international law. And if they don't ratify the international law, there is no penance. There is no repercussions. It's basically, it pings them with an international representation. But if it's not a sovereign ratification of those UN laws, then it doesn't really do anything unless you can bring an individual to a war crime court and you have specifics, and then there's multiple countries that refuse to, you know, allow refuge for that individual. So here's the thing: is that's why I mentioned earlier is that this might be more postpartum than it is present. Is that there is no enforceability of international law. And I've been on lives and I've tried to discuss this, where my background is economics, international relations, and all that good stuff, NGOs, international, whatever, blah, 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 the laws. And the biggest problem is that there are international war crimes. They are very well defined. They can be accused of, but they don't necessarily come to the litany of that process because there's no ratification on the sovereign level. And if you go back and like research like international relations and education, and therein there was a big movement towards regionalism in like the 90s and early 2000s, and people were kind of, you know, the European Union and so on and so forth, like ratification, the free movement of goods, trade, people, blah, blah, blah. And then there was like the African, and like there was a whole world movement towards this process, but it didn't cut. it didn't make it.
Yeah,
So
let's give Tony a chance to weigh in.
yeah.
Thanks for framing that, Amy. What do you think, Tony?
I mean, it's kind of disheartening if you know if you get charged and convicted, but you know you don't really have to go to jail or suffer any type of consequences. But I
Well,
guess we're
that's
just
the
gonna have
rough
to wait and
part
see
because
how things play out.
yeah, that's the rough part. There's no charge, there's no conviction. You gotta like that. So here's the thing. I mean, I'm a little out of practice, but South Africa pulling together as a region and presenting this to the UN, that's the first step. So then they got to find precedents. So that particular international law lawyer that was able to convict the Bosnian issue, that's precedence. So that's a good thing. But they're going to have
Right. I'm
to,
sure he'll find something on some grounds, some good grounds actually, with what's been going on. But Chip, I don't want to take up all your space, man, and let you get to the rest of your guests.
Okay,
Amy,
Tony.
good talking to you. Good hearing from you.
Thank
And
you.
I'll give somebody else my time. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Have a nice night.
Happy New
Thanks for
Year,
being here.
Tony.
Terrific. Amy, just 1 second. Okay, I'm going to see who else is in the queue here. We have Sharon Shaju. Let's bring up Sharon. Just let's see what they have to say, Amy, and then we'll let you commentate once they chip in their 2 cents.
Yeah,
Hello?
I just wanted to talk about the British side of things because I'm British Indian, and basically we had an election this year. There's a lot of pressure politically to support Palestine, but the governments they don't care. They really don't care. We have a terrible government. They're called the Conservatives. They are really down in the polls, so they're having an election later this year. They've decided that, but the main opposition, which is called the Labour Party, which is on the centre left, now historically they've been pro-Palestine, but their current leadership is absolutely not. They're very, yeah, they aren't listening. So it's a bit of a tricky situation, and honestly, I don't think from the British side there's not going to be much change. However, there's protests all the time in London, huge numbers. The vast majority of the public support Palestine, but again, it's not being heard, and I think it's because of these lobbying groups. That's what it is. It's insane, and also, yeah, someone's in Manchester. Yeah, I just wanted to say that really, and it was really shocking when in the security vote, the UK abstained. It's really quite shocking. But yeah, I just wanted to say also from the American standpoint, on a personal level, I think America is one of the biggest sponsors of global tea in the world. Quite frankly, they make a mess of the Middle East. They are literally, their military industrial complex is taking over the whole politics. The whole, your Senate, it's all fake. It's not true democracy. True democracy represents the will of the people. If your democracy, if your actions by your government is shadowing the views of your people, that's democracy. America is not a democracy. It's not. You have elections, but it's all a sham. It's all a show. It's all there for political purposes, very short term. Take a look at China, and I'm not suggesting China's any better at democracy, but take a look at China. I mean, they have long term. They look at the long term because they only have one party, and most of the views are almost aligned. But the US is petrified of China, and one of the reasons is because China is now a superpower, and they're going to overtake the US in every metric, and that's petrifying for American imperialists. Because they don't want to do that. They don't want to see China influencing the world. They don't want to see BRICS becoming successful. They don't want to see any of that because it's American power. They want power. That's all it is. They want America. It's not about installing democracy in foreign lands where literally the people don't want it. There's a reason why in Iran people hate America. You have to understand why these people hate America to truly have peace. But then again, these people in America don't want peace. They just want war. They all want war. And these politicians, Sorry, I can't hear you. Oh, sorry, it was on mute, I think. What did you say?
Do you mean
Chip,
when you
you're
say the
muted.
people in America? Yeah, I got it. When you say the people in America, do you mean the population of the American, or do you the government of America?
In when did I say that?
You said that all these people in America want is war.
Yeah, sorry. The people at the top, the politicians, they don't
The
care.
government. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay.
and the military-industrial complex that owns these people, the government, is America is now at a country where the the corporations are running the country. It's insane. It really is insane. I can say in China, they go very hard on these corporations. Take a look at Alibaba. The guy disappeared for quite a while, a few months,
Jack
because he
Ma.
said the wrong thing. Yeah, Jack
Yeah,
Ma.
Jack Ma.
He disappeared because if the corporations run the government, these politicians, they're just puppets. That's not democracy. So, as a British person, I'm watching. I'm looking forward, I guess, to watching the elections that you guys have this year with Donald Trump. Trump, he's absolutely crazy. He's anti-establishment. He throws the darts anywhere in the room with a blindfold on. But sometimes it hits the target, and sometimes he actually says the right things. For example, personally, I think NATO is quite an offensive organization. I think, putting warheads all around Russia is obviously going to be a provocation. I think Putin was right on that. Unfortunately, I don't agree with the way he went for it. But it was brimming, and America didn't care. Take a look at the amount of American bases you guys have all around the world. It's insane. It's a provocation.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. But yeah, I just want to know who should people vote for, Chip? Seriously.
Well, so you're the second person to ask me that tonight. Um, you know, I like to say it's like a coin. Heads they win, tails we lose. It really depends on what sort of in terms of how it impacts the population. Amy came up with a couple. She talked about this earlier. There are some things that get affected by a presidency. The ability to, appoint Supreme Court justice, which is a lifetime appointment. That's a significant part of the power structure because, with respect to some of the case adjudication we've seen. Other issues, but the presidents, they're pretty much within some serious bookends. If you look at any time presidents have tried to step outside of them, they get corrected pretty quickly. It's just only so much they'll be allowed to do. So I don't think at the federal level, I think the most thing that matters in the United States is your local and your state elections. That's about as good as you can hope for in terms of having an impact. The federal stuff, it's a whole other power structure that has it all owned. You said earlier in the conversation that they're puppets. I totally agree. So for me, it doesn't matter. And just like Vladimir Putin said in that interview, who do you want to be president, Biden or Trump? It doesn't matter.
Yeah, he said it doesn't change. The foreign policy never changes.
Right.
And it's true. It's true.
Yeah, it really is.
So
Anything
what
else you want to bring up or no?
what do you think the solution is to this Israel-Palestine conflict?
Boy,
A long-term solution.
Small
Well,
question.
yeah, exactly. Well, let's look what's probably not likely to happen. Okay, unfortunately, we talk about the two-state solution, but because the West Bank has been carved up and sliced and diced by settlements so badly that to have a contiguous landmass for a state is pretty much impossible, right? So I don't know how you do that other than evacuate or turn over the settlements, which doesn't seem likely. So the two-state solution is kind of off because of that reason. If you look at a one-state solution, which is more practical from a territorial standpoint, you have the fact that if you have a democratic single state, the Arab population has a majority over the Jewish population within the Jewish homeland, right? That doesn't seem practical either. So I think the answer is neither are going to happen. And I think what we're seeing is a slow but steady, although recently rapid, advanced speeding up of the dispossession and displacement of the native Arab population from their indigenous homes, further marginalizing them and pushing them out to wherever they can push them to, or unalive them if necessary.
Okay. Yep, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Yeah, what do you think about that, Amy? You think there's a solution in the bag, or do you think anybody will intervene if that is indeed the goal, or what do you think?
Well, I mean, they are There's, there's a lot of activity on the peripheral. You've got, different attacks in, Lebanon, and you had the historical attacks on any of the other borders. I mean, it seems to be, it's okay. So the atrocities and the unaliving and the genocide going on in that Palestinian territories are unbearable to think about. And then you got October 7th, and that's unbearable to think about. But, I've been researching the whole thing for a while, and my kids are half Jewish, and I was in, temple, high holidays, the whole nine, and invited to Israel and the whole thing, but never really, really wanted to do it because I've always had, an eye on the Palestinian oppression. It's, I don't necessarily have an answer for you, but I can tell you this, is that you could not mess around with Lebanon for very much longer. And you're not going to be able to mess around with other entities that surround that territory in general. It's just there's so much depth in it. If you think about it, it's just like, like Palestine, Lebanon, those are pretty tribal places. That's kind of like their history. You look into it and you're just like, okay, like, before the British colonization, after the British colonization, the statehood from the UN, the letter to the Rothschilds, the whole Zionist movement, and so on and so forth. There's some serious indoctrination, and they're just raising more and more money, and that money is going to keep pushing and pushing and pushing the agenda. And like, they don't care if they unalive women and children. They're cutting off legacies. They're cutting off families. They're cutting off just anything that ties them to the land. And it's just like, you get in conversations and it's just like, it's like talking to a wall. And it's just like, I grew up with a library of Britannicas, and all you got to do is just read history. But the way that the Israeli history has been pushed, and through schools and young and people here that go there, and it's like, their resort to safety, and if the shit hits the fan, we go there, and so on and so forth. It's a strong ideology. They've got an aggressive right-wing government right now pushing it. They have nuclear power. I just don't know. I don't know.
It's gonna be tough. I'm really gonna jump
It's
in on
gonna
that.
be.
So we know it's not going to be easy. Whatever it is, it's not going to be easy. But with the current power structures, with the United States and the other Western powers backing Israel wholly, it's very difficult. The military deterrent that's there, along with the fact that Amy mentioned that Israel is a nuclear armed state, they do have nuclear power, but they have nuclear weapons as well. And by the way, just there's an interesting law that somebody brought up today in one of the TikTok videos that I watched. But there's a thing about the fact that if there's a nuclear armed nation and they're committing acts of whatever, that the U.S. is not allowed to arm them, and that's what we're doing. We're arming. So there may be some legal action being taken against the United States government for breaking its own law about arming and nuclear arms. So real quick, Amy, so I'm gonna take a moment to go down. Thanks for being up here. I really appreciate you being here tonight. You contributed a lot, so you took a lot of your time. Thank you. Somebody asked me, like, how do you break apart from all this stuff? And I think that's a fair question, right? I sleep. Thank God I sleep some. But somebody asked me if taking the dog. Yeah, I go out in the woods. That's my respite from all this madness. And, sometimes, like, I'll just take the morning off sometimes. Like this morning, I usually get up around 6:30. And today I just didn't. I just stayed in bed because I just wanted to get some more rest. So sometimes you just got to do that. You just got to kind of let things go. But many people right now don't have the ability. They're working 2 jobs or they're scraping by, and it's just, life in America is very stressful right now for a lot of people, and it's getting worse. I've seen a lot of TikTok videos where people are literally crying on camera, and they're like, what am I supposed to do? I'm working a main job. I have a side job. I still can't pay my rent. I can't pay my bills. Especially if you're a single mother or something like that, it's really hard. And that's the problem is, I just watched another video of a professor talking about the fact that from 1945 to 1973, which is or section 1975, whatever it was, mid 70s, you could have one job and care for an entire family. Single working parent, mother at home with the kids, you have a pretty good standard of living. And now not only does both parents have to work, but you're lucky if you can even stretch your incomes for both of those parents to cover your basic bills now. So just a whole new world. And it seems like it's only moving in that direction further and further. So I think what has to happen is that and where did that money go, right? So it's no longer going in the pockets of the working class. It's going in the pockets of the shareholder or the money class, the capital. So the only way to change that is to change the structure where the money flows, right? And how do you change that? Well, you have to change the tax laws, right? You can't walk away and pay 3% tax every year on $1 billion of profit. That's not fair. The way that commerce is structured, you can't have massive numbers of chain stores in every community across America where you only have like 5 choices and all that money goes to Wall Street anyway. We need to have stuff back at the community level where the money stays at local. If you're somebody making money off of Wall Street, that's the last thing you want is for those. So and again, because they've got economies of scale, there's going to have to be regulation to overcome some of the business efficiencies. And that again, it's got to all go through Congress. And because they own the Congress with the money they've made, how do you get a law passed that's the catch-22, right? So I believe, like we've talked about, that the only path to changing this stuff, and it's a very difficult and probably very dangerous and very nearly impossible task. But it's like, if it's the only path you got to try, right? I mean, if you don't try, it's never going to happen. And that is, there's going to have to be organizing that goes on. Just like in a union for a company, you have to create a union for the country, because the problem is the whole country wide, right? So those of us who are now pitted against each other left and right that I see every day here on TikTok that are telling everybody you're an idiot or you're a fool or you like Trump or you like Biden, all that stuff, that's got to get put aside, because there's bigger issues that have to be dealt with first. We can fight about that stuff later. But if that doesn't happen, and I don't think it will, I don't think the slide that we're seeing with most working people going down the ladder is going to change. In fact, I think it's going to accelerate like it does in late stage empire. And people are going to be pissed. And there's probably going to be a desire for people to then revolt because they're so angry. But I think by the time people finally figure out that they've been in the pot of hot water, the lid's going to get put on the top in terms of different control systems that I think are coming, which if I get into, I'll be taken off for misinformation. So I don't want to do that. But I'm going to be doing videos. By the way, let me do a little PSA. And we're finishing up in about 6 or 7 minutes, so I'll be quick. But if you've been watching me, my name is Chip Barnes. I'm an Army veteran. My hobby is like geopolitics and other stuff, so I talk about a lot of this stuff. Learned about the Israel-Palestine issue in senior year in college when I was 21. I'm 56 now. And I've just kept a close eye on it because it really interests me, and I felt badly for Palestinians that they were getting screwed. So I've done that. Been an entrepreneur most of my life, so always been self-employed and just had time to do what I wanted to do when I wanted to, which is how I was able to do all this reading and stuff like that. So I try to share it. I've gotten a pretty sizable following quickly. I just started social media just under 3 months back. And as Maz just said, thank you, Maz, I have a link tree in my bio. So like most people online, you have different things like Instagram and everything. So I got all the same stuff as everybody else. If you go to my social media links, you'll see that. There's also some groups that I've created and other people are working on that are talking about these very issues, because it's going to take action to achieve change, right? It's not going to happen by accident. So I created a group. It's called Action for Change. Number 4, Action for Change. If you go to my link tree, you can scroll down. It's a group you can join, interact with other like-minded people. And a lot of people are talking about this, right? I'm not the only person who's identified these obstacles, right? A lot of smart people in the world. So everybody sees the writing on that wall. There's got to be some effort made at a large decentralized movement that has a similar set of strategies and tactics and a similar set of desired outcomes that's very succinct and specific. And then you see what happens, right? That's it. My schedule was mentioned here. I go live on TikTok Monday, Wednesday, Friday, like tonight, from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern. And then every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, I go live from 12 noon until 2 p.m. The only exception is going to be next Saturday, which there's a big march for Gaza in Washington, D.C. on January 13th. And so I'll be in DC that day. I may try to go live, but once you get near the crowd, your cell phone stops working because there's too many people, you can't get online. So, and the crowd's going to be big. So my live next next Saturday, not tomorrow, but next Saturday, I'll probably go a little early on my way down with some people, and we'll just talk. And as long as my cell phone lasts, I'm bringing some extra battery power, but probably not. I'll take video while I'm there, and then I'll upload it later once I get back to the internet. But that's the deal there. There was one more person in the queue. I did want to ask, if you don't mind, I have plenty of videos in my library here. So if you want to check, I've covered almost every subject I've ever talked about in my videos. So lots of good content. And then if you ever want to be a guest on my live, or if you want to talk about something offline, I have an email address. It's at the bottom of my link tree. It says email Chip. It's just chipbarnesonline@gmail.com. Now, if you're someone who doesn't like me, please don't spam the crap out of me. I've had somebody who didn't like my live send me like 1,000 emails. I was like, oh, Jesus. So, let's be adults. But if there's something you want to reach me about, a subject you want me to cover, by all means. All right, we have one more guest tonight. I appreciate everybody being here. I really do. It's Friday night. This is Abu, I think. Abu.
Hello, sir.
Hello.
How you doing?
Good.
I'm so sorry. I didn't expect to be invited because you said you're gonna close, so I wasn't prepared.
Okay. Did you want to say something?
Yes. First, I want to thank you so much for your humanitarian stand with the Palestinians, and obviously it is the right side of history to be on. No brainer. I'm Muslim American, okay, and obviously I would support Palestine no matter what. But I'm concerned about our United States of America too, because it is headed into the edge of a cliff, if I may use that metaphor.
You may.
Yeah. I completely agree with the fact that conventional, basically methods. I didn't say that, but I'm sensing that you probably headed to that direction. Conventional methods, by simply protesting and make our voice heard to our government, I honestly don't see it. It's making a huge dent in our politicians to hear it, because the economic policies, the geopolitical climate, and not to mention we keep getting ourselves into hot water abroad and get into other countries' business, invade them sometimes for no reason. So that needs all to stop, because that is not in the benefits of the United States of America, nor its people. And in my view, our government structure at this point, I myself advocate to a civil disobedience. I think if we have the will and we organize across the nation and we get decent percentage of the our fellow American citizens to do a civil disobedience, that's I don't see any other way they would respond, and serious change would happen, because we know dirty money is in our politics. People, I mean, our officials, most of them are getting bought. They're bought by AIPAC and other special interest groups. They are not really working for the American people. So
Yeah, I mean, the way I don't know if you've heard me frame this before, I'll be quick, but I think I call it the power structure, and it's a combination of several things. It's the high net worth individuals who donate money, a lot of it, to private political action committees, and there's no limit to what they can donate. So that gives them tremendous power. And then you add into that the fact that the amount of money you can give is unlimited by law now. It's constitutional law, which is called Citizens United. So money is considered free speech now. You can't limit it in any way, which is silly. And then corporations have what's called personhood. So they have the same standing legally as any other human being, which is also insane, right? It's a company. It's got a charter. It's not a person, but that's what the law says now. So, and then you have the permanent establishment of the national security state and the war machine, so to speak, the arms industry, the militarism abroad, and they have their reins on foreign policy, right? They control what goes on both covertly and overtly, and they get their way. Let's face it, they have a budget every year that's close to $1 trillion or more, which is insane. And then we don't have more than $700 to give people in Hawaii who lost their entire family and their homes burned down. So it's crazy. And then you have special interest groups, which are industry specific, or in this case with AIPAC, for a foreign government, but they're registered as a domestic lobbying agency. They don't pay taxes and they don't have to divulge their sources of funding. When you add all those things up, it's impossible for the average person to compete with that, right? One person, it's like the one twig, right? You can break it. That's why we have to come together. Now, here's the good news, okay? Statistically speaking, over time, if you can get 3 to 4% of the population to do something together, to put aside these petty differences, not petty, but differences, and work together on a common cause, that's about 11, 12, maybe 15 million people, which is about 5% of the US population, right? It's not that huge amount of people. That's the organizing that would need to take place. If you can get 15 million people in cities across America to take certain actions, which is not buying a bunch of stuff, not going to work, and getting outside and basically jamming things up. Put it like it is. You stand, and this happened in Los Angeles recently. Some people went out to one of the freeways, and they literally took their cars and a bunch of people, and they just stopped. And it's just the whole freeway stopped. And if you don't know California freeways, they're busy as it is. So take that example, but multiply it by like 1,000 different cities. And trust me, if you're a corporate shareholder, all the financial news networks would go, holy smokes, every major city's beltway is now closed down. That's a big deal, right? This is the other thing. If you're the establishment, you have resources to deal with protests, right? You have jail cells, you have handcuffs, you have police, you have military, National Guard, you have all these tools. But how are you going to arrest 15 or 20 million people? Where are you going to put them, right? We're talking about 2.3 million people in Gaza, and they have no idea what to do with that many people. What if you had 20? That's 10 times more people. You know how many football stadiums that is? So that's the point, is that it needs to be enough at scale. Just like in a union, you can't have 50 people out of 1,000 employees unionized. They don't care. Go home. But if you have 800 of the 1,000 people unionized, different story, right? Same idea as this. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, Abu.
No worries. I was listening. I'm enjoying listening to you actually, because what you say, it makes complete sense. And obviously, action needs to happen, because serious action needs to happen in the United States to make them listen, because enough is enough. People suffering, as you said earlier. I mean, parents with kids, they cannot even sometimes see their kids for 2 to 3, 4, 5 days of the week. What if they spend with them what? A few hours after work? That's all the time you get with your kids? Why? Because you're just trying to just make the bills. And it is just unfair. It is seriously unfair to we don't have middle class, in my opinion, anymore. We really don't. Honestly, where did the middle class go? Nowhere, because they don't exist anymore. There is either you're wealthy or you're not. That's how it's headed. Probably there are some left, just comfortable, but not like the 70s, as you referred, not like the 80s, not like the 60s even. I mean, yes, I may not have been born in this country, but I know enough about how it was and how it is now. I mean,
yeah, the big shift was when Ronald Reagan got elected, and there was a concerted effort to strip away regulation and to destroy unions and to consolidate power from a corporate standpoint, as well as to grow the national.
The trickle-down economy, economy philosophy.
Yes. In other words, if the policies favor the quote job creators, that will be best for everybody. But of course, it hasn't been. It's been best for the people who own the companies.
Exactly. We've been on this for how many decades now? And did it make things better? No. So if something doesn't work, why you keep doing it? Why you just keep doing it?
It's not because they're incompetent or don't recognize it. It's because the the people who benefit from it perpetuate it because it benefits them. It's their self-interest, and they don't allow changes to happen because it would detract from what benefits them.
Oh, well, yeah, of course. And not to mention, correct me if I'm mistaken, last time I checked, $365 billion went to Israel since 1948.
Yeah.
Since 1948. Now, if every American would think, what would the $365 billion do? It will end the world hunger. Not America hunger, the world hunger. It will actually provide probably college education, free college education for Americans. It would even expand healthcare to tens of millions of people in the United States. We don't enjoy that. Israel does. They have free healthcare. They have subsidized education, and they have subsidized housing. Who's paying for it? Me and you paying for it. We're paying for it and we don't get it. And that pisses me off, honestly.
Yeah, and believe it or not, we're not even technically paying for it. What we're doing is we're putting it onto a credit card that is following us around like a dark cloud, and then we're paying the interest on the credit card each month, which is what we actually pay for through the annual budget. But we're now close to $34 trillion, which is an unthinkable amount of money, and that's only going to increase rapidly. We're going to have a runaway debt, and the U.S. as a sovereign nation is going to get downgraded from a credit standpoint, and then when the U.S. dollar starts to devalue, we're headed in the wrong direction in so many ways. Economically, we're overextended militarily. We have so many challenges, and there's no simple answer to any of it. Now, there are ways to reshuffle the deck a little bit, but the U.S., the writing is on the wall for the United States at this point.
So I have just a question for you. Do you seriously think that if we were to do a massive civil disobedience, in my view, it should include also refuse to pay taxes, refuse to pay student loan, refuse to pay whatever it is that goes to these guys. You refuse to pay it because that's the only way it will really hurt. Money. They care about money more than anything.
And I think
right?
A lot of people, just because a lot of people right now, because they just don't have the extra money, are not paying their student loans. They're not sending in their tax money if they have to. They don't have it. It's one thing if you choose not to. It's another thing if you just can't afford to pay it because you're paying for rent, food, life's absolute basics, right?
Yeah, that's true. But even as you mentioned earlier, Mr. Barnes, the tax code, it is so unfair. I mean, so if I make $1 million or more a year, that guy is gonna end up paying less in ratio than me, who's making 150K a year.
Yeah, got it. Percentage-wise, yeah.
I mean, seriously. So the wealthy dude is needed more than me. I'm the head of household of 5 people. That is the unfairness of tax.
Yeah, it's an unfair system. The other thing the wealthy do, for those of you who don't know, and this is really sinister. So let's say you're somebody who has $100 million in stocks and bonds and real estate in your asset portfolio. So instead of you getting paid by one of your companies, then you have to pay federal tax, state tax, Social Security, and Medicare, which comes out of everybody's paycheck right now. They don't pay themselves that way. They go to a bank. They have good relationships with financial institutions. They say, hey, how about if you give me a $5 million loan against my $10 million in stock? That way you have a 2-to-1 cushion, and I'll pay you 3% interest on the money. They're like, sure, it's a guaranteed loan, right? Then they pay the interest while they live off that money for the year. They pay it back. And then what happens is the interest that they pay, they can then deduct that from any income they made on dividends from their portfolio that year. So not only do they not pay tax on anything, no income, but they get a reduced tax on the dividends they normally would have to pay 18 or 20% on. They only have to pay maybe a third of that. So it's and then they create things like trusts that completely insulate their assets from taxation on so many levels. It's a total game.
It is. I'm grateful to people like you, honestly, who is speaking about these things, educating people about the reality of our situation. And I'm just praying to God we're gonna reach to the point that enough of us would have enough and just march the hell out in the street and flood it and not move.
You know, the big way we do it is, and again, I'm not trying to tell you what to do. I'm saying this is something that I do. So when I go into one of these highly polarized lives on TikTok, let's say they have 300 or 400 people and I get a chance to speak, I'll ask the other people on the panel, are you against crony capitalism? They always say yes. Are you against corporations having personhood and unlimited money in politics? Yeah. So you have to touch the things that everybody on left and right are all agreeing with. And once you say, well, what if the other people that you hate over there agree with you on those 2 points? What do you think about that? And they always go, I didn't think about it that way. And that's what you have to get people thinking. You got to get them out of the mindset of voting against the other and coming together against the real enemy, which is the oligarchy up here.
That's a great idea. What did you say about what kind of capitalism? I'm sorry, I missed that.
Crony capitalism, where basically people make these back.
Crony capitalism.
Crony capitalism.
I'm sorry because I'm headed home from work. As you can see, it's 10 a.m. I'm still headed from work to home. So, anyway, it was really a pleasure talking to you.
You too.
And please keep the people of Palestine always in your discussions.
I will. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye. Yeah, it's crony capitalism, right? That's where, it's a big club and we're not in it. That's what George Carlin said. So, it's even bigger than this, right? So let's snap your fingers tomorrow morning and assume that everything we're talking about is finished. Like we're in a post-changed world where there's a more level playing field. The people who have been getting marginalized are no longer, they're getting paid a fair wage. The people at the top are being taxed fairly. The system's reformed, so money's not in politics. Like it's more egalitarian, right? Well, okay, great. That would be an ideal change to the system. But then what? You still have the power politics. You still have the international tensions and different interests that are being done. So you got to work out those issues too, right? Then you got to work out the ecological issues, because as industrialization takes its inevitable, inertia towards what it's doing, you have different side effects that are going on with the biosphere. The Earth is going to be here for a long time, but the living system, this thin level of sort of sensitive life that surrounds it, is going to be affected. And industrialization is great for humans because we get better lives, but there's also trade-offs, right? So we have to figure out not only a way to kind of level the playing field both within the industrial societies and the poorer developing societies, but then we have to figure out a way to do it so we don't destroy the place, right? And people are saying it's going to take a long time. I don't know for sure. I don't know how long it's going to take for things like, a lot of people think climate change is not real. Like they think it's a total hoax. A lot of scientists who they're not getting paid by the government, they believe it's real and accelerating. So who knows? I'm not an expert. I can't say for sure. But the scientific presentations that I've looked at tend to make more sense than not. And, the ice cores that have been taken and stuff like that tend to indicate different time periods of higher and lower concentrations of carbon dioxide. And we're in a period that's increasing quickly to a higher concentration. So, you can argue what you want, but that evidence points it out. And we're seeing a lot of changes anyway, right? You're seeing more flooding, you're seeing more weather events, you're seeing warmer oceans, you're seeing, just all sorts of anomalies, it's affecting things like insects, populations and stuff like that. So who knows? The Earth is a complicated thing. These interconnected living systems are very hard to predict and different things can happen. It's a very self-correcting system, which is pretty amazing. The question is, will human development and human population and the whole human enterprise have enough of an impact that it's going to make it hard for a lot of species to perpetuate and survive, including our own, right? And it may not happen for a generation or 2 or 3 or 5. But I think it's fair to say at some point it's going to be a big deal because we only have one Earth and there's only so much resources to carry beings in any one ecosystem, right? So, who knows? Maybe all this is wrong and it's not bad to draw stuff out of the ground and burn it and we can pave all the different places we want and do our thing and it's never going to have an impact. Maybe that'd be great. I'm not for anybody suffering. But I do think there's a little bit of an indifference that pervades the thinking process where it's like it's ours to take what we want. We can do with it what we want. We're better. Everything else is subsequent to us. That's not a very good outlook on any level, because when people do it to other people, we condemn it. We call that racism, right? And when people hurt animals, we call that animal cruelty, right? That's terrible. But what about when humans together believe that they're superior and they do whatever the hell they want to the biosphere, right? What do you call that? I call that shitty, right? So we have to figure out a way not only to reform our systems to make them work better for everybody, but we have to figure out a way to make it work the everybody, meaning everybody, all of us, not just the humans, but the whole family of life, right? It's not going to be easy. So big hills to climb, lots to think about. And again, the average person is very, very focused on just getting through the day, right? And I don't blame them, right? That's a normal thing. If you're struggling and you're just trying to figure out your day to day, you don't have time to sit back in your ivory tower and plan out how to fix the world, right? I don't blame anybody for it's too depressing sometimes, right? It's overwhelming. So, like I said, I'm going to go recharge the batteries tomorrow morning. I'll take the dog out for a walk and smell some fresh air and see the sunshine and, look at the beautiful trees and all the other stuff and just take that moment at a time. And I found out today, I did some Uber driving for a while and I had a private client. She was an older, pretty wealthy lady, and I found out that she died. I hadn't seen her or heard from her in a while, and I thought something might have happened, but I took one of her friends to a medical appointment, and sure enough, she died of cancer. So life is short, right? So it's good to think about these things, but it's good not to get overwhelmed by them, because first of all, we're not at our best when we're all stressed out and overwhelmed, right? So let's do what we can, and not to give up on doing more when we can. But just because we can't do it all doesn't mean we can't do the one thing that's right in front of us, right? And it may seem insignificant, but if everyone does the little thing, eventually it'll push us towards a goal, and that's all you can really do anyway. But the one thing we all can do is we can talk to other people. That's what we're doing right now, right? So I know it's uncomfortable sometimes bringing this up to people who you don't think will be receptive, but what if you don't tell them and they would have been receptive? You don't know, right? So, easier said than done. We're all emotional. We go through these waning feelings and thoughts. It's like the weather, right? Like some days you wake up and you're like, I can't take this anymore. It's too much. And then 2 hours later, you have a nice meal and you feel way better, So it's never as bad as you think, but it's never going to be great. It never stays one way or the other, right? I'm sure we've all felt that. So that's the deal. So with that little life lesson, we'll move on for the night. Thanks for being everybody. My normal schedule again is Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. And then Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday from 12 noon, which I'll be on tomorrow at 12 noon to 2 p.m. Eastern time, which is the same time zone as New York City for those of you outside the country. And I have a link tree in my bio. I don't hammer on this very much, but I am independent. I'm not wealthy. I'm not bought off by anybody, as you probably can tell. So like all of you, I have to survive. So if you're someone who is on the edge of your life, don't even listen to this. But if you're somebody who is doing okay and you can spare a little bit or whatever, if you want to help, there's 5 different ways in the bottom of my link tree, which is a link in my bio. It says Linktree Chip Barnes. And there's things like Cash App, Venmo, PayPal, Zelle, and I think the other one is my Patreon. Tomorrow, I'm going to reconfigure my Patreon to put in what are called tiers. Not crying, like levels. And in the tiers are going to be extra benefits you'll get. So seeing videos early, seeing certain private content, having a Discord server where only members can get certain types of things, members only lives. I'm going to start doing that because I'm not going to be doing live 6 days a week on TikTok much longer, just so you know. I've done it for free for 2.5 months now. And eventually you got to earn some income, right? You got to do something. So if somebody wants to send me a check for $300,000, I'll keep doing it for free, but that's probably not going to happen, right? So I like sharing with everybody and going back and forth. It's fun. It's enjoyable. I hope you like it. But, we all got to find a way to make it work, right? Anyway, hopefully I'll see some of you tomorrow. If you can just tell other people, one of the things you can do is just tell somebody else about me or other people you like on TikTok who are talking in these ways, because that's how we spread the word, right? But I know it's a pain in the ass to have to reach out to others, but it's not that much work, let's face it. And whenever I start to feel that feeling of like, I think of the people in Gaza, and I think of what they're dealing with. And then I think, all I got to do is make a phone call or whatever, or click a mouse, right? Not that big of a deal. So, all right, folks, it was fun. Look forward to seeing you next time, okay? Have a good night. By the way, I want to say thank you to Maz and Em for moderating us. I always forget that sometimes for some reason. Anyway, and one last thing. This recording will be going up to my YouTube and my Rumble channel, so if you missed any of it and you want to watch it, it usually goes up within about an hour. I download it and then I put it up there, so you can check it out, okay? Have a good night, everybody.